Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en i24 News.
Welcome back to this breaking news edition. I'm Benita Levine. President Isaac Herzog is reiterating the urgent call for all 129 hostages held by the Hamas terror group in Gaza to be released from captivity, saying Israel is ready for another humanitarian pause to secure the release of the hostages. He also told a group of diplomats that international organizations need to do more to facilitate the delivery of assistance to Gaza. Now, the youngest hostage in captivity is baby Kfir Bibas, 9 months old at the time of the brutal Hamas terror assault and abduction on the 7th of October. He is now 11 months old. The eldest hostages are in their 80s. They include the 3 men shown in the Hamas propaganda video published more than 24 hours ago now, Chaim Perry, Amiram Cooper, and Yoram Metzger. It's still not clear when that video was recorded, all part of the psychological manipulation being used by the terror group. Meanwhile, on the ground, fighting has intensified inside the Gaza Strip. Confirmation that the soldier killed in the northern Gaza Strip today was 25-year-old Sergeant First Class in the Reserves Maoz Fenigstein, bringing to 132 the number of Israeli soldiers killed in the retaliatory ground operation. Earlier in the day, a major barrage of rockets was launched from Gaza to southern and central Israel. No injuries. Day 74 of the war. Meanwhile, the United States has announced the formation of a 10-nation coalition to respond to repeated Houthi attacks against international shipping. Strikes by the Iranian-backed group in the natural choke point of the Bab al-Mandab Strait are threatening to impact world energy prices, as our correspondent Robert Swift explains in this report.
The United States and 9 other nations are forming an international naval coalition. Their task? To counter escalating Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, a threat which is disrupting a transit route that accounts for 12% of global trade.
We've launched Operation Prosperity Guardian under the umbrella of Combined Maritime Forces and under the leadership of Task Force 153. All countries have the right to move freely and lawfully in international waters.
Canada, the UK, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Seychelles, Spain and Bahrain will participate, either by contributing ships or through intelligence assistance. Actions the multinational force may take range from intercepting Houthi drone and missile launches to striking the group's assets in Yemen, a move the US has so far appeared reluctant to make. Additional countries are involved in the formation, but have declined to announce so publicly. States such as Egypt, Jordan, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia are reportedly concerned with the blowback that could come from confronting the Houthis directly.
Of course, we are concerned about the potential for escalation. Our region is very complex, and we do not need any other conflicts to erupt, and therefore we hope that we will be able to avoid any further escalations in our region.
The Houthis say they will continue attacking ships destined for Israeli ports as long as operations in Gaza continue. How the Yemeni group and its Iranian backers will respond to the naval coalition is unclear and may depend on how aggressively it confronts the Houthis.
So, still in studio, Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangat, former military secretary to 3 ministers of defence and former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories in the IDF, and our senior diplomatic correspondent, Owen Alterman. Gentlemen, thank you so much for staying on for this breaking news broadcast. And the Houthis are vowing to keep up Red Sea attacks. Eitan, what do you make of this 10-nation coalition set to counter them? Is it enough? Is it the kind of response you were expecting?
First of all, I will start to say that the Israeli policy that were not rapidly reacted towards the Houthis and make the priority on Gaza, other direction, and leave this issue for the international community because it's a global problem, I think is showing that is very right. If it's needed, we will be there as well. But for now, it's under the responsibility that on the countries that are led by the United States. Whether it's enough, the answer is no. Secondly, I think that the Houthis is the excuse. The issue is Iranian. This is the reason that behind everything. And I think that the message that will signal towards the Houthis by even political diplomatic steps or by military steps by United States will be something, a message that will be delivered to Iran. It's something much more big because the issue of taking this place that is 17% of the traffic towards the world activities that carry all the goods or oils or fuel and breaking the Egyptian money that are getting from the moving due Suez Canal, it's something that caused a lot of countries to be involved. But the fact you see that there are Arab countries who are not, even they are supporting, are not have the courage to be in the front or a part of this coalition. But the answer will come, I believe, very soon. If the diplomatic activities will not be reacted or will not be answered by the Houthis, we have to expect of some military activities that has started already. And I believe it will be solved very quick. And one thing about it, Israel should also close the circle and give the Houthis an answer on the military field in the time that we will find it ready to do it. That will not be now, but later on.
What do you mean by an answer?
I mean that we were attacked. I'm not talking about blocking the Red Sea. I'm talking about launching of rockets, launching of UAVs. So this is something that is a threat to Israel and in that field when the time coming and we are finding the time correct to react, we have to respond the Houthis and not to make it open space without an answer.
Over and above the Hezbollah threat out of southern Lebanon, over and above what is transpiring in the Gaza Strip, over and above tensions in the West Bank as we speak, can Israel handle all these fronts at once?
Yes, but the answer that we didn't react is the answer to your question. You are right. We have priorities. Everyone will get the answer on the military field on the time that will come.
Benjamin Netanyahu speaking to India's Narendra Modi, Owen. So he has his work cut out for him. Not only is this war unfolding longer than many had expected, not only is he facing political pressure at home, he also needs to reach out to many other players to make sure they are on side when it comes to this Houthi threat. Your thoughts on the task in front of the Israeli Prime Minister diplomatically?
Yeah, diplomatically, you're right. He does worry about the Houthis, but as Eitan and you were discussing, a success for Israel, of course, the logic led this way. It wasn't only Israel's efforts, though it did include those, but the logic led to this being seen not as an Israeli problem, but an issue of global governance, right? Given the impact on the international economy, and I go back to what I say, you can tell a story, right? And Eitan started to tell it, that this is an Iranian activity. This is an Iranian strategy for Iran to flex its muscles, show how much leverage it has so it can choke off this incredibly important artery for global commerce. And until you sit down with Iran, the Red Sea doesn't open. You can tell that story. But on the other hand, from the narrower Houthi perspective, this just doesn't make any sense. Why are the Houthis antagonizing the Seychelles? Right? I mean, that's the absurdity. The Seychelles are going into the 10-member coalition because they feel they need to do so. What on earth do the Houthis in the mountains of Yemen have against the people on the beaches of the Seychelles? Again, it just points to the illogic in what they're doing for their own interests, where they had essentially carved out a place for themselves brutally, right, in a horrific war in Yemen that involved brutality and activity from both sides. Why is it that they see an advantage, not in attacking Israel? It's aggression when they do it, as Eitan said, but there's at least a logic to it. But the logic for the Houthis in doing this doesn't seem to make much sense. Perhaps in the wider frame, seen from an Iranian frame, it starts to make some sense. But even there, it's a real gamble for Iran because, again, as Eitan was saying, there could be a reaction against the Houthis who have done so much to antagonize not just Israel, but so much of the world against them.
Owen Alterman, Eitan Dangot, stay with us. We've got much more to discuss, but right now we're going to check back in with our Emily Francis. She joins us once again from Tel Aviv, where the families of hostages are waiting for answers. What is the latest there, Emily? What can you tell us?
Hi, Benita. Yeah, well, we are after 9, and you can still see there's still a lot of people here. They are not giving up the hope and the momentum of demanding the release of the hostages. We did just hear from a representative of the family who was not present in the meeting with the Prime Minister, but was relaying a message to everybody, not on a microphone, basically saying that from what, not giving exact words because he wasn't in the meeting, but basically saying there was some progress in that meeting, but there's definitely still, a big concern about releasing hostages and having to then release terrorists that are in jails here in Israel. Also a concern of a growing momentum of extreme right-wing groups potentially beginning to protest against the hostage families, saying that it could lead to more blood on our hands. So there's definitely, from what this gentleman told me in my limited Hebrew, I was listening to the Hebrew, there's a little bit of momentum. We're not anywhere near any kind of deal, obviously. There's still a very, very delicate balance from both sides. But again, the families are going to keep pushing forward. You've been hearing them all night. They've been chanting all night, even as senior people from the military are starting to leave the Kiryat, the IDF headquarters here, but they are here all night. Even behind me, you can see there's still families and tents where the families of the hostages are sleeping. So they're also asking people to continue coming here every night to lend support and not to forget and not to stop this fight to bring these hostages home, especially after the terror and the horror of what we've seen over the past week between the video that was released yesterday of 3 of the hostages in custody and, of course, what happened on Friday. It continues to be a very, very tenuous situation. But again, they are not losing hope and asking for more support. And for anybody who wants to come here and be here, it just helps in the resolve, in the fortitude, and in the overall morale of trying our best to bring these hostages home, especially with so many with medical conditions, so many that we don't know if they've been killed in Hamas's hands. There's still just a lot to be very, very worried and concerned about.
So many questions remain unanswered. Thank you so much. Our Emily Francis, live from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Emily. Now, as we've been discussing, at the moment, 129 hostages are being held captive in Gaza, held for more than 10 weeks by Hamas terrorists. They include the Bibas family from Kibbutz near Oz, Mom Shiri, Dad Yarden, 4-year-old son Ariel, and 9-month-old baby Kfir Bibas. He is now 11 months old. The two redhead boys becoming a heart-wrenching symbol for Israelis. The footage of Shiri and her boys etched in the minds of a nation waiting for news on how they are doing, waiting for word on when they will come home. And so we now welcome Yossi Schneider. He is the cousin of Shiri Bibas, joining us now from Holon. Yossi, thank you so much for your time. We cannot imagine what you and your family are going through. That footage of Shiri and 4-year-old Ariel, baby Kfir, 9 months old at the time of the abduction. It's difficult to get out of one's mind. The sheer terror on Shiri's face, facing that pure evil. Your family is begging for answers. Tell us more about what you know. What can you share this day?
First of all, I want to tell you that just yesterday, Kfir celebrated his 11 months. So he's almost three months in some all on the ground, and it's third of his life is in captivity. So I don't think that people can really comprehend it, the size of this thing, the danger that is into, because it's not just danger is his life, that he can be killed by Hamas. It's also, he also can be suffer from health issues, because he needs his vitamins, he needs his formulas, he needs things that are crucial for him in this stage of his life to grow. So if he doesn't get them, he can suffer from permanent health problems. So as you can imagine, our days and nights are very, there is no difference between days and night for us. We are always into it. We're always trying to tell their stories to the world. We're always trying to speak with diplomats to do whatever they can to release them as soon as possible. And it's been today.
It's so unbelievable to think that a baby is in captivity, as you say, spending more than 2 months. We don't know, in darkness, in a tunnel, in a home, in several homes. What did you make of the fact that the Red Cross hasn't been able to get to any of the hostages? Obviously, there are elderly people who we know need medication and need medical attention, but a baby as well. What do you make of the fact that the Red Cross just hasn't got there up until now?
I think that they're hypocrite. They act like an Islamic company, Islamic group, because they're getting into Gaza all the time to take care of and to take people from Gaza to the hospitals and give them medicine and supplies, to meet with Hamas. They're in direct contact with them all the time. So for them to say that they have no option to speak with Hamas right now is a big lie. It's only because they're anti-Semites and they're hypocrites. That's what I can say about it.
It is so difficult to even look at the pictures. We're looking at a smiling, gorgeous baby, Kfir Bibas, capturing the heart of the whole nation. And I have no doubt mothers just around the world looking at that magnificent, smiling child. Yossi, talk to us about the Hamas psychological warfare. Over and above the videos that have been sent out, there was also the uncertainty about specifically what had happened to the Bibas family. Reports at one point that Hamas said they may have handed them over to another terror group. I can't imagine how that impacted you and your family, all this uncertainty, all these horrific games, all this evil. Talk to us.
Hamas told us that they transformed into another group that's called Chazita Amamit. So they just sold them like there's some kind of a pet, some kind of a game. They sold them to another organization. So think how their mind are crooked to sell a baby and his mother and his young brother, just like that they are nothing. They played a psychological game with us. Just yesterday, I met one of the hostages, one of the female hostages that came back. And I just spoke with her. And I saw a person that's sitting in front of me, that is speaking with me and is alive. But if you see the look on her face and the look on her eyes, you can see that she's dead from inside. They play such a bad psychological game with her that even though she's more than 2 weeks here in Israel, she's still scared from them. She's still scared to tell a story because she doesn't know what they can do to her. So think how evil they are, that they traumatize her so much. They send them a movie of Yarden that they told them that Shiri and the kids have been dead, have been killed by IDF, and he's crying for help, and they just playing with his soul and mind. And I don't know who's kidnapping a young baby like Kfir. I don't know what exactly they was afraid from him that they needed to kidnap him. What this terrorist from Hamas, when he saw him the first time, what he thought that he can do to him. He was afraid that what? That Kfir gonna attack him? That his baby gonna kill him or something? He was just 9 months old baby. Why you kidnap a baby? What do you want to do with it? He knew when he kidnapped him that his chance to survive in this condition in Gaza are very low. So why did he do that? He's not a soldier. He's not a warrior. There is rules. Even in war, there is rules. You cannot do whatever you want. Hamas kidnapped them. Hamas holding them right now. Hamas is totally responsibility for their life. Nobody else responsible for their life. Just Hamas. Exactly like if there was any prisoners in any country in the world, so this country will 100% have responsibility for the life and safety of these prisoners. The people that are in Gaza right now, they are not prisoners. The people that have been kidnapped from their bed, they are not prisoners. And they're responsible to their lives. And they're killing our people. They're showing movies of them and pictures of them that been dead to the families. I don't know if you are a mother, if you have children, but think about it, to open your Facebook or to open your Telegram or whatever and see a movie of your children that you waited for them to come back and you pray for them and open for them to come back. And then you see a movie of them. Once you see 2 movies of them. One of them is that they're speaking and asking for help. And then 10 seconds after, you see them dead, lying on a bed with a bullet hole in their head. So I cannot understand the world. I cannot understand how the world is still silent. I cannot understand how the world still support them. I cannot understand how the world is still judging Israel and asking us to stop. I told you, I've been interviewing in your channel for a couple of times, and I'm saying that time and times again, I will say it again. What happened to us in the 7th October will happen to you very soon. If you not wake up, all those terrorists, they are in Europe right now. They're in Britain, they're in France, they're in Berlin, in Germany. They are everywhere, in the US, they're everywhere. You're just waiting for somebody to give them the command to start acting. And when they're gonna do it, you will wake up and some Saturday morning and in holiday and Saturday that we had, and you will hear a knock on your door. And when you open that, what happened to us to the 7th of October will happen to you. It's really the time for you to wake up and understand who we're dealing with. We're not dealing with free fighters like people say. We're dealing with radical terror organizations that only wants to rule the world and kill everybody they're not in the same opinion like them. They're killing gay people just because they're gays. They're killing babies. They're killing children. They kill Holocaust survivors just because they're not in the same set of mind like them. So it's time for you to wake up.
It is a level of brutality and depravity that Israel is still trying to process what happened on the 7th of October. And then, as you say, over and above abducting a baby and a 4-year-old and their mother and other families as well, then sending a video to Yarden. The level of cruelty, what they did, is unimaginable. What kind of reaction have you had from world leaders? This has had a global spotlight on it in terms of Joe Biden, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Qatar's emir. What are you hearing from world leaders? What is your sense of the urgency to make sure that not only the Bibas family, but all hostages get home and they get home safely? What is your sense?
I will tell you something that is not popular. But the world leader right now is kind of on our side, most of them. But there is a huge difference between tell us that you are with us, okay, and doing something with us. It's not just telling that you will support us. You need to really support us. You need to really act. And acting is meaning to do things that like I don't know. The Hamas has money all over the world. Why all the countries doesn't close his money? They just take his money. Why they still want to supply them fuels and food to the Hamas? You need to still do things, real things, not just talk. We're talking. We're not gonna get anywhere. I don't think that the world really realized what happened here on the 7th of October. I've been in Shiri's apartment 2 weeks ago. What I saw in his apartment, I never saw in my life. I never saw in my life. There was a real war inside of her apartment, and she's just a woman with 2 little kids, and the walls are full with bullets. Okay, and the refrigerator is full with bullets, and there is a lot of blood. They murder their dogs, okay, and there was a lot of blood on the floor, and the things that they did inside of the apartment, it's indescribable. So I'm, you know, if you saw Shiri's video when she was kidnapped, one of the things that I noticed that Shiri's, if you look on her face, she's screaming, but she's not making any voice.
Right.
You see she's screaming and not making any voice. So think how scared she was. How she tried to defend her 2 little children. Okay? She was so afraid that she cannot even scream. She cannot make any voice.
It is truly unimaginable. We're looking at those images on our screen right now. Sheer terror. Unimaginable. And we're looking at those images right now. We can see that image is something that is pulling at the heartstrings of every single person watching. A terrified mother clutching onto her 2 beautiful young boys, those 2 beautiful redhead boys. That image will stay with people across this nation forever. We cannot imagine what you and your family are going through watching this. We know as well that the family also has Argentinian citizenship. What kind of response, if any, have you had out of Argentina so far?
They're very supportive. They're totally with us. But again, as I told you before, there is a big difference between speaking and acting. There's a huge difference. There's people from Hamas. There's money from Hamas that's been all over the world. There's leaders of Hamas all over the world. You should start catch them and take them and lock them. You should take their money and cut their supplies. That's what you need to do. I'm telling you once again, you need to wake up before it will be too late for you. I don't want to see what happened here on the 7th of October. I don't want to see it happen in Britain or any other place in the world. I don't want to see it. You don't want to see it. Because the thing that they did, they not just came and murdered. They raped our daughters. They raped the young girls. They killed our babies. They killed our grandmothers and grandfathers. and not just kill them. They molest. If you saw, I saw part of the movies. I saw them. I saw what they did to the bodies. I don't think that if somebody will see it, he will be ever be able to go to sleep again.
They will not be the same having looked at those images. There's no doubt about that. The orange balloons symbolizing the hair of Ariel and of Kfir. You must have seen them at all the protests, at the demonstrations. They have become a symbol of of trying to get these beautiful boys back home. Talk to us about your understanding of the support that you are feeling in Israel right now. You must know the whole nation is hoping and praying for you and your family.
Yeah, everybody's praying for us. We are in the mind of everybody. When I'm saying that I'm the uncle of Shirin, the two little redheads, everybody's just hugging me and crying, and for their safety. And they come back as soon as possible. We did the orange balloons a couple of times. We sent them to the air with a lot of prayers for maybe, I don't know, for some kind of a miracle that they will come back.
Absolutely.
We are not negotiating with humans. We negotiate with the devil. So very hard to negotiate with the devil.
Yossi Schneider, as you know, the nation is hoping for news. The nation is praying for Shiri, for Yarden, for Ariel and Kfir. We so appreciate you speaking to us. Thank you very much. As I say, the nation is waiting for good news. You are in our thoughts.
Please wake up, please.
Yossi Schneider, unbelievable. It's just unimaginable, Eitan Dangot, for any parent around the world. I don't care your religion, your persuasion, your views on anything going on in the world. No mother should have to go through what Shiri has gone through, holding and clutching, terrified, holding onto her two beautiful children. It is just beyond evil.
Absolutely. And, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking which words I will choose to express what I really feel and what I think we have to do or to help. These are human animals, butchers. We say it every day, every moment here when we are sitting and hearing the stories. To see the face of this mother holding her two babies strongly to her arms, surrounded by heroes of butchers around her, taking her, and from that time she has disappeared. And you ask, how can it be? And it can be. You are dealing with people that are connection that like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hamas, doesn't matter the names. It does. If the world is not going to raise such a way of screaming towards such activities, I agreed. It will come to other places, to other countries. Time will come, because these people has in every place, like their small butchers, ambassadors, and they are looking in order to move and to push their ideology of human animals. But above all, this is the world of a family, of two babies, of a mother and a father, that their crime was that they brought two small children in order to build their home for the future. And when you think about a baby of 9 months that is taken in as a hostage, what kind of chances he has to survive with such people? I don't want to think what's going with them now and where they are and how they do. I think that at this case, Israel should to stand more strongly and demand for fuel, for humanitarian. Yes, we will do it. But first of all, bring back these two babies. This is above all. This is your key for opening humanitarian. Unfortunately, the issue of the United States and the policy has been win at that part. It won the two babies.
Certainly, those two children are a symbol for Israel, a heavy heart waiting for word that they should come home safely with their mother, with their father. We wait for news. Eitan and Owen, stay with us. There's much more to discuss because the IDF ground operation in Gaza is intensifying and it's coming at a massive cost too. The Israeli death toll in the fighting there is at 132, including Master Sergeant in the reserves, Naftali Yonah Gordon, who was killed in fighting in Shejaiya in Gaza just over 10 days ago now. For more, we now welcome his father-in-law, Arnold Roth, joining us from Jerusalem. Arnold, thank you so much for joining us. It's with such a heavy heart we welcome you because this is the second time you and your family have suffered at the hand of Hamas terrorists. First, when your daughter Malki was killed in a suicide bombing at the Sparrow Pizzeria in Jerusalem that was back in 2001. And now your son-in-law, Naftali Gordon, has been killed while fighting in Gaza earlier this month. Condolences to you and your family. How are you and how is your daughter Pessi doing?
She's the principal victim, of course. She lost her sister when she was 9 years old and her sister was 15. And those were black days and a very dark period in our lives. Pessi's now a mother of 2 little children, a loving marriage, loving husband, married 4 years, and suddenly it's almost beyond words. Her husband, who rushed away on the 7th of October on Simchat Torah, notwithstanding that they are Shomrei Mitzvot, people who observe Jewish law, he jumped into his car and was at his base before noon. And 2 months later, on the 7th of December, he was killed inside a tank in Shejaiya, in the this infernal battlefield, which is still burning today. And Pessi is confronting the same horror along with the family around her. It's incomprehensible.
We are looking at pictures of Naftali and Pessi and their 2 little girls. Unimaginable what your family has gone through. Tell us a little bit more about Naftali. Tell us about him.
Naftali was in our family's life for a little over 4 years. It was a clear love match between Pessi and Naftali. The wedding was a moment of utter joy. They are both very fine people. I love my daughter. I loved my son-in-law. He was one of the finest, gentlest people I ever knew. A physiotherapist, as I now know, very highly regarded in the Kuppah where he worked and among his colleagues. They lived just a short distance down the street from us because we really wanted them as close as possible. And it's just incomprehensible that he's been taken from us. And let me add that it's not as if losing our daughter Malki is somehow consigned to the dustbin of history. We're still fighting to see her extradited from Jordan after all these years. She faces charges in the United States, and we continue to get treated with the utmost disdain by the United States government, even as it says, yes, 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 this is a foremost priority for the United States. Having to bear up in the face of that open hypocrisy, that politicization of justice, causes us, my wife and I and the family around us, to look at the war against Hamas in a whole different way. And just to say that in a slightly different way in one sentence, Hamas, which has brought this war into Israel by the atrocities of October the 7th, is still celebrating the freedom of the woman who blew up the Sbarro Pizzeria, and it's all thanks to the Jordanian king and his willingness to breach his treaty with the United States.
And Arnold, we know you have been waging this campaign for the extradition of Ahlam Tamimi since she was released in Israel in that prisoner swap with Hamas and then sent to her native Jordan. She chose the target. She guided the bomber there, was arrested weeks later, and then sentenced to 16 life sentences. Since her release, she boasted that she was pleased with the high death toll. Tell us more about that fight for justice, given something we've been discussing here in studio, the U.S. support right now for Israel and its fight against Hamas. How does the U.S. support for the current fight against Hamas get impacted by your fight? As you say, it's been more than 2 decades.
So I'm very cautious about ever expressing any firm views about what political decisions mean when they are made by very powerful organizations like the government of the United States. And it's not a political partisan issue from my point of view. There are probably people watching who are thinking to themselves, oh, yes, he's a Democrat, so he's against the Republicans, or the opposite. He's a Republican and he's against President Biden. No, we've been abandoned, insulted, offended, and betrayed by both sides of the Congress, by the apathy of American Jewish leadership. The results speak for themselves. Here we are, so many years after losing Malki, so many years after Tamimi was finally charged, so many years after the world outlawed Hamas, and we still find that we're talking to the wall. I don't want to mix the two issues any more than I already have. Losing the father of 2 little toddler granddaughters is an awful experience. It's unspeakably awful. But to know that the crocodile tears of the politicians who say we must fight or we must not fight, we must have a ceasefire, or no, we have to press for victory, it's all nonsense. It's all political calculations. And for somebody who is in love with his family, as I am, it's heartbreaking to see how much falseness and dishonesty you can be surrounded by when very important people decide to make their views known to you. Sorry to sound bitter, but of course I am deeply bitter.
Well, certainly it is difficult to imagine the pain that you and your family are going through once again. I'm not sure if you are comfortable to do this, but if you could right now give a message to leaders in Israel, in the US, in Jordan, any leaders, what would that message be right now, given the current situation?
The entry of a person into politics is not an opportunity to forget that you have some spine or some principles. There are principles. Israel confronted horror, an atrocity that has no parallel in modern history on the 7th of October. And in fighting back, despite what the New York Times says and so many other politically spun commentators, this isn't about vengeance. It's about saving our families, saving our country. These people make it abundantly clear, the Hamas, the monsters of Hamas, that given the opportunity, they'll do this again, and they will. We must destroy their war-making capacity, and if politicians don't get behind us, everybody's going to pay a price for their pusillanimity.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. Once again, condolences to you and your family. May Naftali's memory be a blessing. May Malki's memory be a blessing. Arnold Roth speaking to us from Jerusalem. Thank you so much for being with us once again on I24 News. Owen Alterman, the pain is so real and it's impacting children of all ages, as we've heard throughout this broadcast.
Yeah, so many families affected. I mean, seeing the pictures, right, of Naftali with his wife, there again in the image that they live just down the street, right, from his father-in-law. So many families affected. Again, I was explaining to a group last night, on the surface, a lot in our country has returned to routine, right? Businesses are open, retail is open, restaurants are open, most places of entertainment are open, cafes are open. There's a kind of, at least in the center of the country, a kind of veneer of normalcy and a kind of superficial sense of routine. But underneath, it's not normal, right? It's not normal. So many families affected, with the father in reserve duty, something snatched away or going out on the 7th of October on Simchat Torah, again, a Jewish holiday, as he mentioned. And the families left on the home front. Of course, hundreds of thousands of people evacuated from their homes, still living at hotels or hostels or guest houses or private homes around the country. And then the rest of us, again, still with a kind of dormant trauma from those first days that we're carrying with us, and an event that had such a clear beginning and middle and may not have a clear end, but we're taking that beginning with us. And again, it comes back every night on our channel when we hear the stories about the hostages and hear about the fallen soldiers.
There's a report that Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh may be heading to Egypt for talks on a ceasefire deal. That is a report coming through right now. What do you make of that? Your thoughts, Eitan Dangot?
I think that, as I said at the beginning of our meeting tonight, that from yesterday, I think was a major step towards opportunity to reach agreement. I don't know to estimate now what will be the results. I know one thing. After what we saw here, after the people of this country give their answer by running on the 7th of October, joining the IDF, people are not coming back home, unfortunately, forever. Those hostages that are holding, we are forced to make all the efforts in order to release them and to bring them back home. And I think that the meaning of what's going from yesterday, the message that has come from Warsaw by the head of the Mossad, all the others talking with Qatar or Egypt, we are centralizing in order to fulfill our duty, our really right and duty as a state to our civilian to try to bring back those who are still alive, because the clock is running very fast. And I think by this step is also one of the opportunities, I believe, and I'm much more optimistic that in the coming 4 to 5 days, there will be an answer whether we are in agreement or not in agreement. On the other side, Israel continues to make her military activities, because one thing is clear. We will do our duty to return the hostages, but we will fulfill our duty towards the future to destroy Hamas.
And when we talk about these deals, and again, these are just reports, but one gets the sense of urgency that a deal needs to be secured to make sure that the 129 hostages are returned home. One of the issues, the burning issues, is that of humanitarian aid getting into the Gaza Strip. Talking of which, President Isaac Herzog telling a group of ambassadors from 80 countries earlier that international organizations need to do more to facilitate the delivery of assistance to Gaza. Let's take a listen in his own words.
The amount of humanitarian aid can be tripled instantaneously. For the last 2 weeks, Israel has operated new scanning equipment in Nitzana, enabling the entry of 350 trucks a day. For the last 2 weeks, there's a failure by the United Nations predominantly and other partners in the inflow of trucks into Gaza. Only about 125 trucks a day. You could triple the amount of trucks easily if there's only a real serious effort by the United Nations and its partners. And the world has to know that you could have had tens of thousands of tons a day more going into Gaza.
So, Owen Alterman, it's the Israeli president telling international groups to make a plan, get more involved, and make it urgent.
Yeah, it's an important argument. It's not the first time we hear it from Israeli officials that Israel has done all it can, and the backlog and the problem is actually among the international organizations themselves. One would imagine they contest that. Obviously, it's a debate and argument that will still be going on. But again, because of the U.S. pressure that Eitan mentioned before, there is much more humanitarian aid coming in, certainly to the south of the Strip. And obviously, again, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people in Gaza who may have horrific, odious political opinions, but who are not themselves in Hamas, do not participate in hostilities, and certainly deserve the basics, especially in the winter, that they need in order to live and survive and to be healthy.
Eitan.
I think the words of the president are right, but I think they're coming too late. I think that from the beginning, the Israeli leadership should created a system, a structure that has to go everywhere and to demand it and to raise it. It was not done in the volume. It is done today or like the meeting of the President Herzog. And I think one of our lessons, we spoke about what's going in the United States before, is not to wait. We are not have to change our concept from being passive and then active. Be active, be on your side, be a guard for what you are responsible for, because we are losing points, and for a Jewish to lose points is to lose people.
Eitan, Owen, stay with us. We're going to discuss that in more detail, but right now the war continues to be the drumbeat of news in Israel, but politics whispers in the background as a new poll reiterates. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in serious political trouble, and the public is interested in an alternative right-wing leader. But our senior correspondent, Owen Alterman, tells us not to count out the veteran Likud leader just yet. Let's take a look.
For Benjamin Netanyahu, the numbers are pre-apocalyptic. A new poll Monday from Israel's Channel 12 News showing the Prime Minister's Likud party polling at just 18 seats in the Knesset, down from the 32 seats the ruling party won in elections just last year, with 500,000 right-wing Israeli voters shopping for a new leader, despite Netanyahu's messages.
I will not let Israel repeat the Oslo mistake. I will not allow that after the great sacrifice of our citizens and fighters, we bring into Gaza those who teach terrorism, support terrorism, finance terrorism.
The full breakdown from the poll. The governing coalition sworn in last December down to 44 seats from 64. And the big winner for now, Benny Gantz and his National Unity Party. In the current lineup of parties, Gantz would likely be Israel's next prime minister. And asked between Gantz personally and Netanyahu personally, the public wants Gantz by a margin of 45% to 27%.
I would like to send my support to the IDF soldiers and a big hug to all the bereaved families and those who are still waiting for their loved ones. All the citizens of Israel are with you and behind you.
The starting point is horrific, but Netanyahu could mount a comeback, even against upstart rivals within the right. Netanyahu could connect to his base by blaming the October 7th failure on elites. He could paint rivals as not truly right-wing, or not able to stand up to foreign leaders like U.S. President Joe Biden. All tried and true Netanyahu scripts. Episodes which could be back for another season in 2024.
That report by our senior diplomatic correspondent, Owen Alterman. He's here in studio. Benjamin Netanyahu, can he survive this, yes or no?
Probably not, but I think his chances are higher than most people are rating them. And again, for the reasons that we set out there, because again, so importantly, the arguments that Netanyahu will need to make conveniently are arguments that in a sense he's already made, right? It's the elites, it's the generals, it's the people in the army, it's the intelligence, those elites who are chasing me, who are chasing us, who are chasing you, right? It's a kind of argument in this narrow sense Netanyahu is similar to Trump, right? That Trump is used in the United States. And then again, the other arguments that we laid out, right? About being right-wing, about being able to be a statesman and all of the rest. Of course, that said, as the opening line of the piece said, the numbers right now are pre-apocalyptic.
Unbelievable numbers.
44 seats for the current coalition. They lost a third of their voters. A third of their voters. And again, we have to remember that they had lost a lot of their voters on October 6th because of the judicial overhaul and other issues. So Netanyahu's starting point in October 7th was bad, and obviously it's gotten a lot worse for a lot of obvious reasons. So when you start in that kind of a hole, you have 500,000, and this is a small country, 500,000 right-wing Israelis. That's what 14 Likud seats are. They're looking and they're shopping for a new leader. His numbers are completely underwater against Gantz, even against Naftali Bennett. So there is a space, and the take on this poll has been, among political correspondents, that there is a big space for a new coalition of right-wing leaders that's not Netanyahu, right? So that these voters can find someone else. There's an obvious logic to that. On the other hand, Netanyahu will have arguments that he can make. He's made them before, so they fit with his brand, and he'll have another bite at the apple, again, playing a game into the medium term with this election campaign. So, again, a lot of political drama that awaits.
Eitan Dangot.
The answer for your question will be decided by the nation, by the people, those who are now in Gaza, and those who are looking what happened, and none of our leaders will succeed not to stand before the nation. And for Benjamin Netanyahu, I'm waiting for one thing, to say, I'm the Prime Minister, I'm responsible for the good and the bad things as well, and I will take the responsibility. Till now, this kind of thing, it's empty box.
Is it likely that a personality like Benjamin Netanyahu would do exactly what Eitan is describing right now, given your understanding of the political sphere right now? Your thoughts, Owen?
Listen, he hasn't done it yet. And I think he hasn't done it yet because he sees risk in it and he thinks he has arguments to be able to deflect it. But going back to Eitan's point, look, a few places, and people who know the country will know where I'm going as I list them off. Sderot, Kiryat Shmona, places like Ofakim, Netivot. There are places that are hardcore parts of the Likud base that have been very directly affected. So there are going to be potentially 100,000 or more votes of Likud voters who live in these communities, who've been directly affected, and in some cases not treated all that well by a government that hasn't functioned all that well on this issue, at least as seen by the wider public, who are going to be lost to Likud, and these people are going to be out there, and they're going to be loud, and they're going to be making the case, and that's going to be, I think, a big, big obstacle for Netanyahu. So whether he takes responsibility rhetorically or not, there are going to be a lot of his own voters at the hardcore of his base who have voted Likud for decades, long before Netanyahu was on the political scene. It may be going back to 2 or 3 generations even. And they, even if Netanyahu doesn't clear responsibility, they, at least for this element of the conduct of the government during the war, are going to be holding him accountable.
Which brings me to the next question, Eitan Dangot. So much being made about the day after inside Gaza. Will the IDF retain overall security responsibility? Is that a good idea? What does it look like?
The IDF should and must take the security responsibility for the coming years in Gaza, but not for the civil life. It has to be done based of what we faced in the Lebanon, South Lebanon in the past, and also in the West Bank, something like integration. We have to move the threat from the window of the mothers, of the children that are living and should return back to live near the fence, few kilometers deeper, and this is the responsibility of IDF.
Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot, Senior Diplomatic Correspondent Owen Alterman, thank you both so much for being here in studio. And as we are about to wrap up this edition of our breaking news coverage, rocket alert sirens are sounding in the northern part of the country just moments ago. As we are speaking, sirens are sounding in the northern part of the country. Obviously, our team will keep bringing you updates on the developments as they happen. I'm Benita Levine in Tel Aviv. Thank you for watching. Our rolling coverage continues shortly. Stay tuned. This is I-24 News, Breaking News Edition.
Made for Me, a unique concept in Israel. Custom-made men's fashion to your measurements. Made for Me, designer of all your events. Schedule your appointment at www.madeforme.co.il. Made for Me, official dresser of I-24 News.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front lines, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
העצה ורב העלילי האדם לתת.
בספרות אייל שיר שכתב.
עוד רגע והיית אצלי בידיים.
שמותם על שפתיי. אדוני מנת חלקי וחוסי אתה תומיך גורלי. חבלים נפלו לי בנעימים, אף נחלת שפרה עליי. לא תיתן חסידך לראות שם.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24 únicamente en i24 News.
Hello, good evening. I'm Yoav Limon. This is a special edition of Strictly Security coming to you live from the Jaffa port. The U.S. is set to block yet another UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. This comes following another firm commitment by the United States to keep supporting Israel's war efforts against Hamas. This time it was by U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin during his latest visit here in Israel yesterday, announcing the formation of an international 10-nation coalition aimed at securing shipping routes in the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb from Houthi missiles. After the tragic accident in which 3 Israeli hostages were mistaken for Hamas terrorists and shot dead by IDF soldiers, the Chief of Staff, General Herzi Halevi, stressed the Army's rules of engagement, saying that people holding a white flag in surrender must not be fired upon. All of that is happening as reports emerge of more meetings with the Qataris, and the possibility that a new hostage deal might be in the works. But family members of hostages held in Gaza are not waiting for the politicians, but rather taking their public demand for immediate action to the next level. Let's begin. First, as always, some updates, and tonight we'll start in the US, where the UN Security Council has put forward another resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Our correspondent Mike Wagenheim is at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Mike, what will the resolution contain, and when is the vote?
Getting pushed back further and further and further, and unclear at this point if there's going to be a vote at all today. It was supposed to be last night, then this morning, then the afternoon. Now it's set for 5 p.m. Eastern Time, midnight Israel, and everything revolves essentially around 4 words in this resolution, which was drafted by the United Arab Emirates. And here are those 4 words: suspension, yes; cessation, no. What does that mean? Well, there are several things called for in this resolution. Among them, tops among them, it calls for the urgent suspension of hostilities to allow an unfettered flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza by land, air, sea, however they can do it. It also calls for the immediate release of hostages and medical aid to be provided to them as well, and the importation of fuel into Gaza to meet all the humanitarian needs. But beyond that, it also calls later on for steps to take to make sure that there is an urgent cessation of hostilities. That means a stoppage. That means a ceasefire. And that is the part, the main part, that the United States objects to. Everybody else, it seems, is on board with this resolution. The U.S. is holding it up at this point because they don't want to handcuff Israel. They don't want to get to a point where there is a mandated ceasefire before Israel can achieve its military objectives. So that language is still being worked on. Robert Wood, the deputy U.S. ambassador, just spoke to reporters just before we got on air. He said they're still working through the language, but refused to respond to a question about whether or not there would be a vote tonight. There's one other holdup from Washington's side, the deconfliction mechanism that's involved in this resolution, which means that they want to make sure that the aid workers that go into Gaza are kept safe, that they're not accidentally struck by Israeli forces. The language on that is still being worked on again because Washington doesn't want to hold up Israel and the IDF. If they feel like they have a terrorist target in sight, they want to be able to take advantage of the opportunity. But the deconfliction mechanism is critical right now. The UN says too many of their workers, their staff have already died. They don't want to see any more harm come their way. Still very much up in the air whether we'll have a vote tonight or at all on this resolution.
Mike, one more question. The feeling within the UN within the last few weeks was very hostile against Israel, very fond of the Palestinians. And it was, mainly disturbing when it came, to everything that we've heard from here, the rape cases, et cetera, and nearly we didn't get any feeling for Israel, despite those horrific acts that we suffered, we Israel and the Israelis. Is there any change in that?
Not so much so. And the United States made this point today at the Security Council meeting. Their representative said again and again and again, this council, this body, has to condemn Hamas for the October 7th attacks. The General Assembly has refused to do it. The Security Council as a whole has refused to do it. Individual members have. But still, we're still not at a point on October 7th that they can condemn Hamas for their actions, let alone to try to balance out some sort of resolution now. And the real sticking point, one of them at this point on this resolution is, look, if you're going to handcuff Israel, which must abide by this resolution, well, Hamas, on the other hand, they don't have to. They're not a state actor. Israel might have to stop firing and might have to stop their military action. That doesn't mean Hamas, as an exchange, has to give up the hostages. It doesn't work that way in real life, even if it works that way on a resolution. So no, Israel is getting no sympathy right now as a whole from this body, and really hasn't for many, many years. It's not going to start now.
Yes. Alone, as always, luckily for us, having the Americans on our side. Mike, thank you so much for that. Let's move back to our region. Nicole Tzedek, who is in our southern front, southern Israel. Nicole, your updates for this evening.
Yes, well, I can tell you we continue to hear some of this pounding in the Gaza Strip. But earlier today, one of the major updates we heard from the IDF themselves is that they finally have a stronghold over Jabalia in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. And with that, they said that they have completely dismantled the operational capabilities of Hamas's northern Gaza City Brigade. And this is a big deal. This is where we've seen a lot of the heavy fighting. The IDF saying that they've killed 1,000 terrorists in Jabalia and arrested more than 500 suspected terrorists. Now, of those 500 suspected terrorists, at least 70 of them are said to have been participated in the October 7th attack. We're talking about 1,500 terrorists that infiltrated here into southern Israel, butchering families, raping them. And 70 of those that are now arrested, that committed these attacks, are now arrested by the IDF. So this is a major announcement coming out of the IDF, and also just shows that they're working to really get a stronghold on the northern part of the Gaza Strip. And for the most part, especially with today's announcement, they do. We continue to see a lot of, earlier in the day, some Israeli activity, military activity, bombing, explosions happening. But now their attention is really turning towards the south, specifically Khan Yunis. We heard from Defense Minister Yoav Gallant earlier today saying that Khan Yunis is the new terror capital. And they're actually, the IDF Chief of Staff, or the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, said in his statement earlier today that they are adding more troops to Khan Yunis to continue to really try and tackle the terror hotspot that it is now. And that has mainly so far been the IDF's operational plan, to go neighborhood to neighborhood, city to city, tackling these hotspots. And we've seen them do it in the north, and now they're really turning their attention to the center and the south, it seems.
Yes, and let's speak a bit about the civilian front. We hear more and more about the possible return of some of the civilians to their homes within the next few weeks. What do you hear about that? How many of them will accept the call to return? And what about the kibbutzim, the settlements that surround Gaza, which were hit the most and the worst in the attack of October 7th?
Well, when you're talking to these residents that have been evacuated, of course they want to return home. With 74 days, more than 2 months, they've been living in hotels, completely uprooted from their communities. And you bring up a good point. Many of their communities are just not there. Their houses completely destroyed. So when we talk about going back, there's really two ways to look at this. Because at the one hand, obviously these citizens need to feel safe when returning, and the IDF continues to reiterate that they will be safe and they will not let their citizens or their residents return to these southern communities if there is still this security threat and the threat of Hamas. But also, they have to have homes to return to. So that's going to be another step. Even once they are able to return physically for safety reasons, it's going to be a lot longer before many of these residents can actually live in their communities, because they're going to have to completely rebuild many of them for the most part. So what we're looking at right now, the IDF is continuing to monitor the situation, but most of the residents, they say they want to get back. They say they want to continue to be in their southern communities whenever they have the chance to, and whenever that chance may be, especially as they are getting more of a stronghold, especially on these northern areas. It could be sooner rather than later, but still, the IDF doesn't want to take any unnecessary precautions and move people that have been evacuated back before they're ready to.
Nicole, thank you so much. Keep safe. Thanks for this report. Let's go now live to Tel Aviv, and our correspondent Emily Francis. Families are taking their protest to a new level regarding the hostages, 129 that are still kept in Gaza. What does that mean?
Well, hi, Yoav. Listen, people have been here in droves all evening, and every hour they were stopping exactly at 29 minutes past the hour when the invasion started on October 7th and reading the names of all the hostages, one per second, for a total of 241 seconds. That's basically what they were doing tonight, with a huge amount of support. This was also going on at the same time that some of the families were meeting directly and personally with the Prime Minister. We don't know the exact details of those meetings, but a short while ago, one of the mothers, Yael Adar, the mother of Tamir Adar, 38-year-old son who was one of the hostages, did come out and give a short statement to the media in Hebrew. So in my limited Hebrew, I was able to understand the gist of it. But basically, she was saying that they were able to have a more intimate meeting with the Prime Minister. It was a handful of families rather than the big concerted effort of the families that we've seen before meeting with the entire war cabinet. She said that they were somewhat encouraged by the fact that it was more intimate, that he was willing to listen to their feelings and their wishes, and that they will continue to have some more intimate, smaller scale one-on-one meetings with individual family members. So she did seem somewhat encouraged that there's a little bit of wiggle room in the efforts to try to come up with a deal to bring the hostages home. But she also did go on to say that she wasn't going to give any details because she didn't want to compromise the ability of these other future intimate meetings, so all of the families will have a chance to be heard, and also for them to consult within themselves as far as what their wishes are. But also earlier, one of the family spokespeople, had heard also some details from those meetings, and there's also, of course, concerns, which is why they want people to come here and support more than ever every night. There are concerns that extreme right-wing protesters will start to gather on the other side of the street in front of the Azrieli Center, calling to not have hostage deals and to let out murderers and other Palestinian terror prisoners, which could lead to more bloodshed and in essence, stifling the hostage families. So there is a concern of a counter-protest that could grow. So the more support and the more encouragement and the more camaraderie, the better for the families. That's what's keeping them going. You can't really see too well behind me, but there is literally about 24 tents set up where many of the family members are sleeping here, and it's cold. It's getting very, very cold at night, but they're not going anywhere, and they're here together. And even when I spoke to them, some of the families this evening, they're obviously very tired, and I'm saying, listen, you guys are our heroes. You're our heroes, how you're holding it together and staying positive. And they say, you know what, we don't feel like heroes. This is what anybody would do if it's their family and their children. And what's keeping them going is the support of the Israeli people and all the people also watching, the Jewish people around the world, the diaspora. This is a very, very important, very delicate situation. And we can only continue to pray that there will be some relief.
Emily Francis, thank you so much for this report coming to us live from Tel Aviv. We move on. The United Nations announced the formation of a 10-nation coalition to respond to repeated Houthi attacks against international shipping. Strikes by the Iran-backed group in the natural choke point of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait are threatening to impact world energy prices. With more, here is our correspondent, Robert Swift.
As much as 70% of the petrol stations across Iran were disrupted Monday, with Iranian authorities citing a possible cyber attack as the cause.
Some people say it was hacked. Some people say, well, we wonder if maybe there is a shortage. But these are all questions that need to be answered by a high-ranking authority.
Iranian state media singled out hacking group Predatory Sparrow as responsible. It has been linked by Israeli media in the past to Unit 8200, Israel's signals intelligence agency. This cyber attack comes in response to the aggression of the Islamic Republic and its proxies in the region, the hackers said in a statement in Persian and English on Telegram. The United States and 9 other nations are forming an international naval coalition. Their task? To counter escalating Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, a threat which is disrupting a transit route that accounts for 12% of global trade.
We've launched Operation Prosperity Guardian under the umbrella of Combined Maritime Forces and under the leadership of Task Force 153. All countries have the right to move freely and lawfully in international waters.
Canada, the UK, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Seychelles, Spain and Bahrain will participate, either by contributing ships or through intelligence assistance. Actions the multinational force may take range from intercepting Houthi drone and missile launches to striking the group's assets in Yemen, a move the US has so far appeared reluctant to make. Additional countries are involved in the formation, but have declined to announce so publicly. States such as Egypt, Jordan, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia are reportedly concerned with the blowback that could come from confronting the Houthis directly.
Of course, we are concerned about the potential for escalation. Our region is very complex, and we do not need any other conflicts to erupt, and therefore we hope that we will be able to avoid any further escalations in our region.
The Houthis say they will continue attacking ships destined for Israeli ports as long as operations in Gaza continue. How the Yemeni group and its Iranian backers will respond to the naval coalition is unclear, and may depend on how aggressively it confronts the Houthis.
And now I'd like to welcome our guest for this segment, Dr. Shaul Yanai, a lecturer on Middle East history, with me here in our studio in Jaffa, and Michael Knights from the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thank you, gentlemen, both for joining me this evening. Mr. Knights, I'll start with you. What exactly do the Americans, does the administration want to achieve by formatting this new mechanism, 10 countries mechanism, aiming to do what exactly?
Well, it's aiming to share the burden between a larger number of countries and the United States for Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb security. And it's also there to try and draw support, political support, to the US as it tries to deter the Houthis from attacking international shipping.
And, you know, we've seen quite a few countries joining that force, but we haven't seen some that we expected to join that force, at least openly, mainly Saudi Arabia and Egypt, the main 2 countries that are on that route of sailing.
Well, the Saudis are very close to finalizing a Yemen peace process deal with the Houthis, and that's very important to them and their development of Red Sea economic cities like Neom. So they want to get that out of the way before they do anything that might anger the Houthis or disrupt those peace processes.
Yes, Shaul and I here with me in the studios. Let's go backwards. Let's speak about the Houthis. What do they want?
What they want actually is
to divert the internal attention from problems inside Yemen to external threat, like as war in the Red Sea or with Israel or with the new coalition that are forming against them. Why? Because Yemen is a failed state. It doesn't exist actually. Basic services are not functioning at all, and the population is starving, living in ruins, even more ruins than Gaza today. And after the Saudis stopped funding them, the last year the Saudi funding gave them a lot of money for a government operation. That was in the agreement for the ceasefire. It stopped now. So the Houthis government is more willing to go to war against the United States might and its coalition than to risk another tribal war inside its coalition, because the Houthis are also a coalition of many tribes. Some of them are, for history, are against each other. And without the money to pay them, or without promising them to rebuild Yemen, and the Houthis cannot do it. They are like the Hamas. They know how to go to wars, but not how to build a state. And the last year they failed to do it. That's why they are risking or doing what they are doing now. And of course, two more reasons. One of them, they are proxies of Iran. Iran helped them during the war against Saudi Arabia with money, funds, training, weapons, missiles, and etc. And the Iranians getting their payback now by using the Houthis against Israel and against the United States and Saudi Arabia.
But Shaul, the Houthis in Yemen are not afraid to pay a price, because, you know, the U.S. is not very likely to use its force. But once it does, it's a superpower.
Well, yes, it's superpower, but Houthis and Yemen tribes faced a lot of superpowers before, and they didn't succeed because the superpower, even Rome, back then, in 2,000 years ago, reached Yemen and left Yemen because the tribes were too difficult to handle. Saudi Arabia failed, even Britain failed to control the tribes and control just Aden, no more than that. They are used to be at war. They used to live on almost nothing, so they are not afraid from the United States. In a sense, they are welcoming the war. It's horrible things to say that, because they think that the United States will not go to full war against them and try to solve the problem in diplomacy, and the Houthis will have some demands like a share of the oil revenue in the part they are not controlling, but controlled by Saudi Arabia and the United States with the formal government. So if they will even risk a limited war, they can gain much more by diplomacy and negotiation later on.
Yes, so Michael Knights in Washington, I get back to you. We've heard Dr. Yanai speaking about the Houthis, looking from Washington. Obviously, the U.S. doesn't want a regional war, not mentioning a world war, but practically, this is a world problem, because once the Houthis are blocking the Straits of Bab el-Mandab, the prices of oil rise, the prices of shipment rise. That's not an Israeli problem. That's a global problem, and the globe is led by the U.S.
Yeah, we all remember how difficult it was when the Ever Given cargo ship turned sideways in the Suez Canal a couple of years ago, caused enormous damage to the global economy. So the US feels responsible for keeping these shipping lanes open. What it's done by building this coalition is to do some burden sharing. You know, the US is doing a lot of things at the same time. It wanted some other partners to come in and help it to escort these tankers. And when the US is close escorting these kind of tankers and cargo ships, it stands a much better chance of intercepting any drones or cruise missiles that are fired at these vessels, and it can completely deactivate the risk that one of these vessels will be seized by either Houthi pirates or Somalis who may be working in collaboration with the Houthis. So it's the difficult thing to do an escort operation. But for the US right now, it's easier than striking the Houthis to try and deter them.
Two more questions, Michael, quite conspiracy ones. One, another client which is very much disturbed by this situation is China, because China is, is one of the biggest merchants in the world, and they pay a heavy price for that. So it might be a potential for the U.S. to collaborate with China. That's A. And B, Iran, which plays with the U.S. for a long time now. It's not time for the U.S. not to play with the hands of the octopus, but with its body itself, with Iran itself?
Well, look, the Chinese have ships in the Red Sea, and so do the Iranians, both supposedly to stop pirates, but they didn't stop anyone from grabbing the Galaxy leader. So it shows that they're not there for constructive purposes, and it shows that the Chinese cannot provide a security guarantee to anybody. Ultimately, the last time that the Houthis and Iran needed a gesture from Israel, many people say that the Israelis undertook a covert attack on the Safiz spy ship that is in the Red Sea that the Iranians keep there. There's another spy ship right there now, Behzad, which provides details on the movement of tankers north and south, and also monitors the US and Western naval escorts. So, who knows what might happen to that spy vessel in the future, or indeed the Iranian frigates.
And as for Iran?
That area. There's a lot of vulnerability for both Iran and the Houthis if Israel or other actors decide to strike. And the Iranians in particular are quite sensitive to receiving sharp cuts where it hurts in places like the Red Sea.
Yes. Last words from you, Shaul. Iran should be concerned that Israel or the US or both might attack it?
No, because in the last decades, there wasn't any direct attack against Iran or open war. And actually, Iran's strategy from the beginning of the revolution was to take the United States out of the region, from the Persian Gulf and from the Red Sea, and maybe from the entire Middle East, because it sees itself as the real superpower of the region, and the United States is an obstacle for it.
Yes, yet to be continued. It's a daily battle here and around our region. Michael Knights in Washington from the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thank you so much, and Shauli and I here with me in the studio. Thanks for joining me. A quick break for commercials, and when we return, we'll take you to the underground and show how years of hard labor and millions of dollars in international aid money were put to use by Hamas. Don't go anywhere.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front lines, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra, espadas de hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en i24 News.
Hello, thank you for being with us. We turn on now to the field and to our northern front. Our correspondent Zach Anders is there. Zach, the updates.
Well, as we were waiting to go live, a alarm came on over the phones, not over the air. We weren't hearing an alarm in the communities. There's not really much time to react. We got out of the vehicle, and as the interceptors were firing overhead, counted 5 interception missiles that seemed, in my experience, to be targeting just one thing. Often it's dark, so I'll have to add that caveat that we weren't able to see what was being fired overhead. This is coming from southern Lebanon. But in my experience, when it is these rocket attacks, they seem to be all over the place, the interceptor missiles. But this was 5 interceptor missiles all going to the same place and trying to hit appeared the same thing. We've seen so many drone launches over the last 72 hours that I'm curious to see what this is going to end up being. We still have not had confirmation yet what kind of launch this was from southern Lebanon in the last 30 minutes, but it did appear to be something that could have been a drone.
Yes, Zach, a little bit about the civil front, civilians who were evacuated, those who stayed. What do you hear from them?
Well, really, in positions like we are, it's nothing but IDF and journalists. These are mostly evacuated communities, although when you get a little bit further into the valley here in the Upper Galilee, that's where more and more people start to appear because they can't leave their livelihoods, their homes. It's these northernmost border communities that have been evacuated. The red alert coming in tonight in the last 30 minutes was for a community right on the border. They have been well evacuated. This is also this latest rocket barrage, or a launch, rather, I should correct myself, whatever this was in the last 30 minutes is in the same exact area where an IDF soldier was killed several days ago and 2 others wounded in this same area, the same community that had the red alert, which I've been told has been evacuated.
Yes, Zach, thanks so much for this report. Now we turn back to you, Mike Wagenheim, in New York, and there is a decision regarding the vote in the U.S. Security Council.
Decision not to make a decision. The Security Council vote pushed back once again. It was scheduled for last night, then this morning, then this afternoon, then late this afternoon. Done for today here at the Security Council. They're going to try again tomorrow. There's a Security Council meeting already scheduled on Afghanistan at 10 a.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Israel time. And then the idea is that after that meeting is over, they're going to try to have a vote on the UN Security Council resolution pertaining to the Israel-Hamas war. But the U.S. objections still stand. They still want that language taken out about eventual steps toward a cessation, a stoppage of hostilities. They don't want to handcuff Israel and force them into a ceasefire. There's also language in there about the deconfliction mechanism that's also not to Washington's liking right now. They're still trying to craft that language, polish it up, and get it to a point where Washington can agree not to veto it. I think the really interesting thing coming up, if Washington continues to disagree and continues to threaten to use its veto, it'll be really interesting if the United Arab Emirates, which drafted this resolution, is going to put it up anyway just to try to back Washington into a corner. Remember, it's pretty much the world against the U.S. and Israel right now here at the United Nations, and the UAE might want to send a message here to Washington that they're isolated on this issue, especially at the Security Council. But it's now on to tomorrow morning here in New York to see if this thing moves forward.
Yes, anything you hear from the Israeli delegation over there, Ambassador Gilad Erdan?
No, and he didn't arrive here today. The plan was for him, when there was going to be an opportunity for him to speak, he would speak. But because there's no vote, because there was never really a guarantee that this thing was going to happen at all, or even was close to happening, he didn't make his way over here today. So there's been no comment out of the mission. I just requested, when I heard about the postponement to tomorrow, to try to get a comment, but that was just a few minutes ago. This is breaking news, and there's been no early response yet from the mission. It's likely, though, they're going to play hands off here and let Washington do the talking for them.
Mike, thank you so much for this report. See you back tomorrow. Game over, game resumes tomorrow. We move on as Israel emerges from the tragic killing of 3 hostages by friendly fire last Friday. The government is making efforts to show the public that talks on a new hostage deal are moving forward, with Mossad chief Dadi Barnea reportedly back from a meeting in Warsaw, Poland, with Qatar's Prime Minister and the CIA chief yesterday. Senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman sketches out the terms for the talks and how this time they're different from talks on that first deal in November.
The funerals remind Israelis of the stakes. Here, the funeral of hostage Alon Shamriz, killed in the tragic friendly fire incident, his hands raised, his white flag not enough to earn his rescue. A reminder to many in Israel of the price of waiting on another hostage deal.
You already saw the light, but it became darkness. Those who abandoned you also murdered you after you did everything right.
And so the Israeli government reportedly ramps up talks on a new hostage deal, with meetings afoot and progress made. Now, with 2 key differences from that first hostage deal in November. First, that November deal focused on women and especially children, who were in the twisted logic of Hamas assets, but also liabilities, with the terror group taking a beating internationally for holding 3-year-olds hostage. So Hamas had more incentive to free the kids for a lower price. And then the second difference, the balance of power on the battlefield.
Only continued military pressure will lead to the release of all of our hostages. My directive to the negotiating team is based on this pressure, without which we would have nothing.
That first deal in November came when military pressure in Gaza was at a high, with a sense of big incremental gains each day. And so, big incremental losses each day for Hamas. The sense now is of a war that is making slower progress. Less incremental pressure on Hamas means less sway for Israel in talks, all of which adds up to tougher decisions for the Israeli government and public. Not only to want fervently to bring them home, but also to understand the price in all its dimensions.
A giant tunnel leading from deep inside Gaza right to the Israeli border was unveiled by the IDF during the war in Gaza. Yet another example of what Hamas was doing with the assistance meant for the Gaza residents, but was used only for terrorism. I-24 News senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev was at the tunnel inside the Gaza Strip.
It is nearly 3 miles long, more than 2 meters high, and wide enough for cars to drive here. If anyone wondered what Hamas did with the giant funds provided every month, this is the answer.
This tunnel had every infrastructure needed: cement, electricity, water, and also various hiding places for weapons, meaning it was ready for use. And the shaft that is very close to the Israeli border, roughly 400 meters or so, a quarter of a mile from the Israeli base of Erez, less than 2 minutes, and the terrorists are already in Israeli territory.
It's the biggest tunnel found in Gaza so far. Hundreds of terrorists could come to this point practically undetected.
This tunnel runs for miles and miles into Gaza, into towns like Bet Hanun, Bet Lahiya, 2 or 3 miles inland. The terrorists come all the way up here, and then the shaft being on the other side. Once they come up to the ground, they're merely 400 meters or a quarter of a mile away from the Erez, crossing the Erez base.
Just before the tunnel is demolished, the IDF showed us what the money envelopes from Qatar are really used for.
Hamas, as a terror organization, showed his face using his money only for terror. All of his investment only for terror, not for the civilians of Gaza. He doesn't care about the civilians of Gaza. They're only being used for one thing, for being a human shield.
The tragedy that Hamas is putting its own people in does not end there. The Erez crossing was the place through which 17,000 workers from Gaza crossed in every day to work in Israel and earn wages far higher than they could in Gaza. The adjacent Erez base was built only to allow for humanitarian cases from Gaza to be treated in Israel, but these were exactly the targets Hamas was looking for.
We saw what happens in the tunnel inside. Now let's see what happens outside. Right behind me is the shaft. From here, the terrorists come to the ground. And just to my left, about 400 meters, a quarter of a mile, you see the concrete wall. That is the Israeli border. That is the Israeli base of Erez. You can see it right over there. Nothing more than a 2-minute run, and the terrorists are already there. That is all it took them to get from this position and into Israel.
And in a war so full of terrible symbols, here's another one. 3 soldiers were kidnapped from the Erez base. On the day the tunnel was unveiled, 2 of those soldiers were pronounced dead.
2 of my soldiers that were kidnapped alive from this base on the 7th of October was murdered by Hamas militants while were in captive inside the Gaza Strip. So for me personally and for my unit, it's a very complicated day.
Every corner of the Erez crossing and the Erez base serve as a reminder of what happened here on that terrible morning. Just a few hundred meters away, the mission ahead is clear.
Without demolishing the tunnel project of Hamas, we cannot demolish Hamas.
This may be the largest tunnel in Gaza, or at least the largest one uncovered so far, but many, many other small ones exist all across the Gaza border. This is where the hostages were taken deep into Gaza, and from there disappearing all across the Strip. Israel, among other missions, now needs to destroy all of these tunnels to make sure that such a thing never, ever happens again. Jonathan Regev, I-24 News.
And now I'd like to bring in Israel's former National Security Advisor, retired IDF Major General Yaakov Amidror. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Good evening.
General Amidror, we've seen the reports regarding the tunnels. The tunnels were known to Israel for years. Everything was known to Israel, and yet we are surprised by, how vast this project is. Should we be surprised?
Very much depends on the intelligence that we had before the war. The more intelligence that you have before the war, the less surprises you find during the war. And this is one area that should be investigated after the war. I'm not sure that it will be for the experts in the intelligence a real surprise. I think it's more surprise for the ordinary people which do not have any familiarity with the intelligence. No question that the sophistication of the tunnels system is a surprise, but I'm not sure that this part of the project was unknown before the war. I don't know.
Let's look at a bigger picture, starting with your permission, with the hostages. What are the chances to reach a new deal? You won't obviously go into details and into prices, but in principle, we hear the families, we understand that we're losing lives, we're losing people. We saw the tragic accident last Friday. So is there any chance to reach a new deal with Hamas?
From the tragedy of the last weekend, we can learn that military pressure can bring the hostages. The fact that at the end it was a tragedy was not a reason to change our assessment that by putting pressure on Hamas we might get to the places of the hostages and to release them. But at the same time, if there is any way to negotiate and to pay prices relating to the powers in the war itself and so on and so forth, and releasing other terrorists in the West Bank, I think that Israel should go to negotiate and to try to find if there is a logic in the price and to pay. If the price is not logic, we will not pay. But if the price is logic, to pay.
Yes, because I'll push you a little bit on that, because, you know, if we look at numbers, so Israel got only one hostage back alive by a military operation, and a few bodies, remains of five, if my memory does not mistake me, of other hostages, and 115 by negotiating. So obviously negotiating brings more.
If there is a way to negotiate, we should not miss it, and we should negotiate. Not in every negotiation we can succeed to achieve an agreement, but to negotiate, no question that we should.
Let's speak about the operation on the ground, your assessment on what we're seeing, because, you know, obviously the Israeli public wake up every morning with the names of soldiers that pay the heavy price of falling during the war. Obviously, we see less achievements. How should we look at the situation on the ground?
I don't agree with the description of the situation of yours. I think that if any Israeli expert would have been asked about the number of casualties after this stage of the war, in which we are almost controlling militarily the north part of the Gaza Strip, and we are entering deeper and deeper into the Khan Yunis stronghold, I'm quite sure that the numbers of casualties that he will offer would have been much higher than the number that we have today. So I'm not sure that the number of casualties is an issue for disappointing. The question is, what is the stage that we are in? We are now finishing to gain the control in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. It will take a few days and it will be finished. And we are going to new areas in the south. We just moved other forces from the north into the south. And when we are now dealing with the Khan Yunis center of gravity of the south, and it will take time. My assessment that the IDF needs another month or two, probably two, to be in a position to say, okay, I'm controlling all the strongholds of the strong points and the centers of command of the Hamas. Now I'm moving to another stage in which we are cleaning slowly, based on intelligence, the intelligence that we are gathering from the interrogation of the Hamas people in our hands, and all the documents that had been confiscated in the headquarters, will give us a better understanding of the details of the system that we have to destroy. And based on that, we will have to begin a continuous operation of cleaning Gaza. It will take a year probably. But slowly, we will have to be in a position to go to all the halls, the manufacturing centers, the headquarters, the command and control system, the tunnels, the details of the tunnels, and to know what is important to destroy and so on and so forth. But I believe that this intensive stage, we need for the intensive stage, we need another month or two, probably two, to be in a position that we are controlling not just the north part of the Gaza Strip, but also the south part of the Gaza Strip. And many operations had been done in the center, in spite of the fact that that will not be the focus in the next 2 months.
General Amidror, we hear a lot of criticism here in Israel for supplying aid to the Palestinians, oil, food, water, etc. The cabinet decided to do that in order to get more legitimacy for the world to keep on fighting. If you were at your previous position and you would have heard the criticism in Israel, what would you answer to that?
I think that it is very wise and necessary to give the civilians in Gaza the aid which is needed for them to be in a position that they will survive the winter which is coming, including food, water, health supply, and oil. That is not making the difference in the war between us and Hamas. It will help the population. It might help Hamas, which is confiscating part of the help which is going into the Gaza Strip. We see it, we understand it, we know that will happen. Hamas is not taking care for the population, it's taking care for Hamas, but that will not save Hamas at the end. Yes, it is easier to fight when you are when you have the food and the water, but I don't think that will make the difference in the balance of power between us and Hamas.
Last question, General Amidror. Our northern front, we see a war below the level of war, but Israel wants to reshape that area. Can it be done without a full-scale war?
I think that there are two options. One is diplomacy, and the French and the Americans are doing what they think should be done to convince the Lebanese and through the Lebanese Hezbollah to move to a little bit to the north, 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers. We have to give the chance to both the diplomacy of the French and the Americans and to the Lebanese government. If you ask me what are the chances that will happen, it's very, very, very low. But we should give it the chance to happen. And if not, we have two main possibilities. One is to continue the war in the north, as we did in the south, and to push Hezbollah this 10 kilometers. But that will be a long and devastating war. We have to take it into consideration. It is not going to be easy. It's 10 times more complicated and more dangerous than the war in the south, mainly for the home front of Israel. Or we can postpone it to a better day. These are the two chances that we have if and when it will be clear that the diplomatic efforts do not.
Yes. General Yaakov Amidror, thank you so much for being with us this evening. And now I'd like to welcome Mr. Yehuda Kfir, civil engineer and researcher in the field of underground warfare. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. So we see this, huge industry of tunnels in Gaza. A, how it was done. B, how complicated is it for them? And C, how can you destroy it? Because we need to destroy it.
Yes, you're right, of course. It was done a long time ago. You know that the now think that it was been done by for 15 years, or I think that maybe more. It's not a new strategy, but it's a very effective strategy. You can see it how hard it is to the IDF to take the tunnels down and to demolish the tunnels and to take the hostages and of course the leaders of the Hamas. But I have to mention after Amidor spoke about the possibilities that the leaders of Hamas will escape through tunnels under the border to Sinai, to Egypt. And I don't see anything that the IDF do to stop them from doing it. So maybe it would be easier to go to dig, let's say in the Philadelphia road. So this kind of thing will not happen.
Yes, but I asked you about my last question was regarding how do you destroy them, because Israel has to destroy all those tunnels. How can you fill them with water? Do you have to bomb them? How do you do that?
You have the IDF has a lot of method to destroy the tunnels. One of them is flood them with water. I think that it is the most effective way till now that the military is using in the Gaza Strip. But also we see now that special units go into the tunnels to fight into the tunnels. I think that it's now that we are learning to deal with these tunnels, to fight in the tunnels is a very effective method. And I think that we will see it more and more. And of course, it's very unfortunately that the Israeli army didn't started with more units that can fight in the tunnels, like the American used to do in Vietnam War, for example. And in the first war, when soldiers used to fight in the tunnels.
Last question, a quick one. Should we be afraid of the same tunnels in Lebanon, or it's a different terrain, harder work?
First of all, we don't have to fear from anything. Because the subterranean warfare is like the air warfare or the under the sea warfare. So we have to use this area to fight, and we have to develop our methods to fight in this area. So of course, I think that the most important thing for Israel in Lebanon is to try to dig our tunnels to the tunnels that the Hezbollah have, and to fight them in this subterranean war.
Yehuda Kfir, thank you so much for being with us, for waiting for us. Thank you for this interview. We'll be right back. You're watching Strictly Security. Thank you for staying with us. We begin this hour with Emily Francis here in Tel Aviv. Emily, thanks for being with us. So the latest regarding the hostages, their families, and is there any optimism within them, that something will change and we will see a breakthrough within the next few days?
Yoav, there actually is. It's hard to believe. It's hard to hear it coming out of my mouth, but one of the mothers of the hostages came out and spoke. She was the one that one of the few families that were in the meeting with the prime minister. This is Yael Adar, the mother of Tamir Adar, her 38-year-old son, of course, one of the hostages. And we saw all night people here in droves with optimism, reading off the names every hour. And she came out and said that they had an intimate meeting and that it was positive, that the prime minister did actually listen to their feelings, listen to what they had to say. She didn't want to go into details about the subject matter of that meeting for obvious reasons. It's very sensitive, and because she wanted to make sure that the other families had a chance to have these continued meetings with the prime minister before the Hostage and Families Forum would sit down and come up together with how they wanted to proceed vis-a-vis, the rest of the ministers that they've been meeting with. So, yes, there's reason to be positive. What that means specifically, we don't know. We know that anything when it's as tenuous as this, it's not an easy solution, that, yes, we're going to go in and negotiate. You have people from both sides, also concerned of far right-wing people coming and protesting on the other side of the street here against efforts to release the hostages. So it's still a very, very delicate balance. But as far as a little bit of a smile, when there's not a lot of reason to smile, is a little bit of an indication that there is some kind of movement.
Yes, and what do they plan for the next few days? Because they were talking about, rising the level of protest by them.
Yeah, for sure. They want anybody who's watching, more people to come here in support of the families. This is what's keeping them going. So every night they're going to be doing something different. Tonight, like I said, they began closing off the entrance into the military headquarters here at 29 minutes past the hour, which is when the invasion began on October 7th, reading all the names for 241 seconds, which is the original number of hostages that were taken. So they just want more and more support because there is a concern that, again, some far-right-wing protesters will also come in the hundreds and try to negate that, which would obviously make matters much more tense. So the more support, the better for the families. And, of course, the families are very appreciative of everybody who is coming here and offering a hug and giving them a reason to keep fighting and keep being positive and hopeful.
Emily Francis in Tel Aviv, thank you so much for this report. We move on. He was wounded 3 times in the past, even spent several weeks in a coma. But for Lieutenant Colonel Shachar Spada, Deputy Commander of the 36th Division, or Gash, as it's called in Hebrew, there was nothing to hold him back from joining the fight on October 7th. Now, moments after leaving the fighting in Gaza, he takes on the important job of shaping the next generation of IDF commanders. Our French correspondent, Matthias Inbar, met him on the southern border. Let's watch.
Lieutenant Colonel Shachar Spada, who just recently left the Gaza Strip. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. First of all, how are you feeling?
I feel great. Thank you for the opportunity. I feel great because I know that this is a war. I feel great because I know this war is a battle for the existence of the Jewish people. It's a war of justice, and we are on the right side. When this war ends, with our victory, the entire world will be thanking us.
We spoke in the past, including shortly before October 7th. You usually speak of courage and strength, but I can tell that you're hurting.
October 7th was a turning point in the history of the Jewish people. That's how I see it. I was at home. No one drafted me. I drafted myself because I heard what was happening. People ask me, why did I gear up when no one forced me to? And my answer to them is that they're slightly confused. In my world, when a person is in need of help, I gear up and try to help out as fast as I can. That's the way I was brought up.
You were in synagogue, And so you grab your weapon and drive to the scene.
Et vous partez dans le sud.
Well, not my rifle, because I didn't have it with me yet, but my handgun, yes. I got into my car, not knowing where I was going. I got into my car and drove south, with no clue of what was expecting me. For me, the war began when I identified the body of my dear uncle, who was killed in the city of Ofakim. You see the situation. You realize that you have no choice, and you have to carry on.
Please accept our deepest condolences for your loss. So you say that you had to carry on. It's been more than 2 months since that moment, and you're still going.
Yes, 2 long months, but we are ready to keep going for as long as it's needed. Be it 6 months, a year, whatever it takes. We are ready to stop our lives completely for this cause. I have 5 daughters, a business, and it's uncomfortable for me. I didn't want this, but I feel that this is the entire Jewish people's fight, and they're standing behind us. We are their shield and protectors, ready to give up our lives to protect them because we have no place else to go.
You have just returned from fighting in Gaza. Please try to explain the complexity of fighting in an area like Gaza.
You have to realize one thing. Hamas uses the local population, but our strength is in our humanity. We can be lethal, we can be sharp and decisive, but we will not kill innocent people. Hamas is using innocent people to shield themselves. That's why it's difficult for us to fight there. But you can be safe assured that we are able to handle this difficulty, maybe a bit slower, but with great success. They hide behind civilians. We will achieve victory without harming innocent people.
Give us an example of that cynical use of civilians as human shields.
I really hope that people around the world watch this and see how Hamas raised roadblocks, trying to prevent people from leaving the war zone in those humanitarian corridors we created to evacuate civilians, families. They wanted them to stay. Hamas uses them for protection, and once they started moving, they shot at them. It's really difficult for me to see as a fighter in the army. We kill combatants. We make a clear distinction. Hamas does not. They use schools, hospitals, places we would normally see as untouchable, but they build their entire infrastructure at these locations.
And is it true that they have placed speakers in toys and played sounds of crying children to lure soldiers into certain places?
Hamas is definitely trying by different means. Some you have mentioned and some we won't mention here. They're trying to lure our soldiers into spaces where they can harm them. Our soldiers, in my eyes, are good-hearted people. So when they hear a cry for help, they run to assist. Hamas knows that too. They're trying to trick us in every possible way, with zero morality, because they know that innocent people will be hurt in the process, but they don't care.
You were wounded several times in the past. In one case, you were in a coma. Tell our viewers about the atmosphere in Gaza, the morale of the men, most of whom are the age of your children.
I was wounded several times in my military service, 3 times to be exact. But I never claimed any disability rights from the state, not because I'm a rich man or something like that, but because I believe God has given me a chance, a life, and now it's my time to give back. What I saw among our ranks is courage and heroism of young people who are saying, we are here for anything. We are the state of Israel. People who are wounded and refuse to be evacuated to hospitals. People who lost their best friends and didn't attend the funerals because the fighting was still ongoing. This is our true strength. Those young people who answer the call. It's amazing to me, and it's our superpower. I may be older, but I see the spirit, and it fills my heart with pride.
We hear of fallen soldiers on a daily basis. IDF announcements are delivered to dozens of families. How is it perceived inside the strip whilst the fighting is happening?
Mais vous, à l'intérieur, ça se vit comment, justement?
It's hard either way. I won't lie to you and say it's not scarring our hearts. We'll do our crying after the war ends. Right now, what I see in front of me is our children, your children, my children, filled with pride. And we will mourn after the war ends, but right now, we simply don't have the time for it. Now it's our turn to serve our country, and it's a great privilege to me to say that I am here.
Est-ce que c'est vrai, Shachar?
Is it true that they forced you to leave Gaza to take over this company, Commander's Training Course, for future field commanders?
Vous vouliez rester à l'intérieur.
It's true. But if you are the type of person to say, I am here, you understand that you have to do whatever is needed. And if I'm needed here, training our future commanding officers, then that's what I'll be doing. Obviously, I'd rather be inside fighting, but I see it as a calling to shape the next generation of commanders who will be taking this army forward, this country forward.
Like the head of the Southern Command said recently, your generations believed in leading in front, and that's why so many officers were killed in Gaza so far, because they were up there in the front line.
The motto of the IDF is follow me. It means you will always see commanders leading the force. We set an example to our soldiers and make them feel that they can trust their commanders. We bring experience and professionalism, all of the things we accumulated during our service. We don't hide in the tunnels, we run forward. And we will always do that. That is the motto of the army and of the people of Israel.
Qu'est-ce que je peux vous souhaiter?
What can I wish for you and the fighters in Gaza?
Jeunes soldats qui sont à l'intérieur.
אז ברשותך אני אעביר איזה מסר חזק בעיניי. אני רוצה שכולם תבינו ותגבינו טוב ותקשיבו לי.
I want you all to pay close attention to what I'm about to say. We will be victorious. Even if it takes a long time, we will win for the people of Israel. Yes, the price will be high. But our real mission is to figure out where to go after the victory. What kind of society we want to build here after this victory is achieved. This victory which will be served on a bloody platter. We will build our future with love, with care, with humanity, with Zionism and the love of the land. We are the eternal people, and we will have the upper hand, I promise.
Lieutenant Colonel Shachar Spada, thank you so much for this interview.
Yes. Israeli security and military officials have acknowledged the intelligence failures that allowed Hamas to plan and execute the October 7th attacks, but new details have emerged in a report from the New York Times describing how Hamas financed its activities with a portfolio of investments, a financial network that the newspaper says Israel's leaders were aware of but did not shut down. With more, here is our correspondent, Robert Swift.
As early as 2015, Israeli and US officials became aware of a network of companies that not only funded Hamas, but were owned and controlled by it. An empire that was worth an estimated $500 million. While organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda have frequently used fronts to launder money, Hamas's portfolio was a genuine enterprise, launched with seed money to go out to make a profit, the New York Times reports. It reportedly included mining, chicken farming and road building firms in Sudan, 2 skyscrapers in the United Arab Emirates, a property developer in Algeria, and Trend, a real estate company listed on the Turkish Stock Exchange. An Israeli financial intelligence team, Task Force Harpoon, began tracking the investments, flagging up their concerns to US counterparts and the Israeli cabinet. But the threat from Iran and the finances it distributed to its proxies, Hamas among them, ultimately eclipsed fears over the Hamas portfolio. And at the time, the Israeli Security Service's consensus was that money flowing into Gaza would help tame Hamas, rather than arming it for the next attack. a strategy led by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Regarding this published investigation, I am not familiar with it, and I suggest you wait until after the war. A thorough examination and a thorough investigation of all these things will be done, and the picture will become clearer.
While there were some sanctions placed on businesses and individuals in 2022, ultimately the flow of money from it was not disrupted. Money that Israeli intelligence assesses was directly invested into Hamas's military preparations.
For more than 2 months, Israel has been fighting a lower intensity conflict on a second northern front against the powerful Lebanese militia Hezbollah. More than 100 Lebanese, mostly fighters, and at least 11 Israelis have died in the north so far. Tens of thousands of civilians on both sides of the border have fled the conflict. There are fears the conflict could escalate into a full-scale war between these arch enemies.
A funeral for fighters killed in action. In the streets of Beirut, thousands gathered to honor 3 militants from the Lebanese militia Hezbollah. All casualties, organizers say, of an Israeli airstrike in southern Lebanon. Hassan Salman is a 23-year-old Hezbollah fighter, his chest still raw from a fresh tattoo of his dead friend's name.
What was your friend fighting for?
Fighting for
when
our
he was
country,
killed?
for our country, to protect our country.
Do you think the war will continue?
Yeah, she will continue till we disappear them.
The crowd chants death to America, death to Israel.
Why are you proud?
Yes, because we are stand beside Palestine, we are stand beside Gaza to let all the world know about what Israel doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Are you afraid that more people may be killed in this war?
That makes us more strong.
Hezbollah is an Iranian-backed Shiite Muslim militia, officially labeled a terrorist organization by the US, the UK, and the Arab League. It's also a sworn enemy of Israel. Soon after Hamas fighters attacked Israel from Gaza, Hezbollah began launching cross-border rocket and mortar attacks on northern Israel, depicted in this Hezbollah propaganda video. Israel retaliates with artillery and airstrikes. Though the deadly cross-border conflict has continued for more than 2 months, United Nations peacekeepers deployed here say both sides seem to be holding back.
Our assessment is that for the time being, neither side wants to escalate to full war. But again, that's a question, I suppose, for the belligerent parties.
In a speech last month, Hezbollah's leader, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, said his fighters are essentially a diversion, drawing Israeli troops away from Gaza.
The Lebanese front reduced a large part of the forces that were used to attack Gaza and attracted them toward us.
Israel's prime minister recently issued a stark warning.
If Hezbollah decides to open an all-out war, then within its own hands it will turn Beirut and southern Lebanon, which are not far from here, into Gaza and Khan Yunis.
How much appetite do you sense within Lebanon for a new major conflict with Israel?
Absolutely zero. No one wants a conflict in Lebanon.
Lebanon is still reeling from a years-long economic crisis. Though it is the most powerful political force in this deeply divided country, analysts argue even Hezbollah can't afford a wider war.
I think Hezbollah realizes that Lebanese society could not absorb a greater conflict. And on top of that, I think they realize that their own power in Lebanon would be greatly diminished.
So far, Hezbollah says it has lost around 100 fighters in this border conflict. Any mistake could make this war much, much worse. Ivan Watson, CNN, Beirut.
Yes, our international affairs correspondent Owen Alterman joins me here now in our studio. Owen, thanks as always for being with us. Before we dive into the war, I want to speak about the hostages because the Palestinian Islamic Jihad releases a few minutes ago a video of 2 hostages that are held in Gaza, 2 civilians. Obviously, we won't show the video itself because we don't want to play into their hands, but these are the pictures of Gadi Moses, 79 years old, and Elad Katzir, 47. What can we learn from the releases of these videos yesterday by Hamas, today by the Islamic Jihad? What did they want to achieve?
Well, look, I think two things. It seems to me one is obviously the continuation of the psychological warfare against Israel, as it's called here, right? Again, showing that they have the upper hand, that they have these cards, that they have these hostages, that they have control and they have power, and that we don't. That's what it's meant to transmit. And obviously to try to deepen the cracks in the society and the differences of interest between families of hostages and, in a sense, families of victims, right? Who may have different interests in terms of prioritizing the goals of the war. That's the whole reason, or one of the reasons the hostages are there, is to try to deepen the rifts and in that way try to earn more for each hostage and get a better deal. That's number one. Number two, it seems to me that this could be a kind of a practical sign too, because as you know, Yoav, there's a sense of uncertainty in Israel about what exactly is the fate, has been the fate of the 129 or so hostages that are still there. How many of them have been able to survive? How many of them are alive, as we've sadly seen so many who have been killed or have been murdered? And maybe this is meant to give a sense that there is a reason for a negotiation and a reason for a deal, because there are still hostages there for Israel to save and for Hamas and its perverse logic to trade.
But let me look at the other way. Maybe it shows signs of pressure within the Hamas because of the Israeli army operation. Maybe we haven't seen such a video for weeks. And currently, when Israel is pushing in northern Gaza and southern Gaza, suddenly we see those videos. So maybe it's a sign of pressure on their side.
I hope so. I know it's interesting, Yoav, and I in a sense defer to you on this, but my own feeling, and again, admittedly as non-defense or military focused, reporter or expert, that the incremental gains that we have been making over the last few months, the Israeli military, have been less than over the course of October and November, right? Where the war felt like it was moving very quickly and there was very quick progress in the territory of Gaza. There's been a sense, maybe up until the last day or so, that I don't know about a sense of stasis, but that the incremental gains day to day simply weren't what they were in October and November. And in that sense, Hamas was incrementally, at least, under less pressure than it was before. So again, if in fact it means that they're under more pressure, obviously that's good news for Israel.
So let's move on the ground. There is a report now by our colleague Barak Ravid on Walla here in Israel, saying that Israel told the Qataris, the head of the Mossad probably, because he deals on that Israel is ready for a week ceasefire in the return of 40 hostages. So now the ball moves on to Hamas. Hamas wanted a ceasefire. What is your assessment on that?
Well, look, again, going back to what I was saying before, I mean, moving away from the particulars of what's being negotiated, just understand the terms and the context and the backdrop. You know, if in the first round, Yoav, of talks before that first hostage deal, it was Israel that had more leverage, right? For two reasons. Number one, the military pressure, which we just talked about, and the state of play on the battlefield. And number two, because the hostages that were being talked about then were first and foremost the kids. And they're an asset for Hamas and its perverse logic because they can trade the kids. But the kids are also a liability in terms of how Hamas was being seen as for having them and taking them around the world. Obviously, the hostages in that sense are all a liability, but much more so when you can take a tabloid in Britain and slap on it the picture of a 9 or 10-month-old baby. You know, that's a liability for Hamas, and that's not true at this stage because the kids, with some horrible exceptions of the Bibas kids and Bibas baby, have been released. And so we're moving on to other categories. So it seems to me that Hamas has more leverage in this round, and that explains why it is that at least in the public-facing element, it's been Israel. It's been chasing Hamas for a deal and not the other way around.
So let's move on to the northern front that we've touched earlier in the show. We see a huge effort by the Americans, by the special envoy Amos Hochstein, to reach a deal between Israel and Lebanon. But one must admit that the chances for that are very slim because Hezbollah, Lebanon received the 1701 resolution after the Second Lebanon War, saying that A, embargo on weaponry to Hezbollah, B, no force south to the Litani River. Both were, just washed away by Hezbollah. Why should they agree to a new deal? And if they agree, why should we believe them?
Well, listen, I think the chances for a real deal, right, and what you're talking about, an actual deal which is enforced, which both sides, or Hezbollah, let's say, respects, which actually brings long-term peace and security, which actually serves that kind of purpose, I think you're right that the chances for that kind of deal are fairly slim. But the chance for some other kind of deal, I don't want to call it a fake deal, but in use the Hebrew phrase, an Israbluff deal, right? A deal that everybody knows isn't really a deal, right? A deal that...
But why should civilians come back to their houses in northern Israel after they've seen what happened in Gaza? A fake deal is no deal.
It has to be a deal that's good enough to convince them to go back. You're right. It has to cross that threshold. But to do more and to actually be a really substantive deal, the kind we're talking about, that we don't know. I mean, look at what 1701 was, right? It was that kind of deal, right? And it was good enough
for the time.
For that period of time, right. And obviously the terms are different now, and Israel's lived experience is different, most importantly since October 7th. You're right. Whatever deal that is made has to cross a threshold of enabling those who live in the communities on the northern border to go back. But whether it would actually do more than that, and do more than just kick the can down the road and allow the Biden administration to say and to feel, and not just to say, but to know that they've prevented a wider conflict in the Middle East, which is obviously the last thing that they want for reasons that are too obvious to go into. And for Israel, which I suspect, again, I defer to you on this, is going to be just exhausted coming out of the war in the South and not all that ready for what could be a very, very costly war against Hezbollah, even if the goals are more limited in the North than they were in the South still. And obviously on the Lebanese side, we saw it in that report. Lebanon is not Gaza and Hezbollah is not Hamas in the sense that Hezbollah is more responsive to its constituents, both in the narrow sense of its tribe, if you will, of its sector in the Shia population in Lebanon, and the wider constituents of the rest of the country, because the Shia sector, Yoav, has to live with the rest of the country, and the country is having so many problems.
Owen Alterman, thank you so much, as always. And that's all the time we have for this week from all of us here in the Jaffa Port. We wish you a safe, pleasant, and quiet evening. Hope to see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front lines, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Must reach the whole world. The I-24 News Channel, broadcasting from Israel, with dozens of correspondents throughout the world, brings the truth from Israel to hundreds of millions of people in scores of countries.
Completely gunned down in their beds.
De la frontière qui sépare Israël. The state of emergency and war in Israel.
Bringing Israel's story to the world. I-24 News Channels. Now on Hot.
nombre es Carlos Burovich.
Yo soy Nicole Michel y esta es una emisión especial de News 24 en español dedicada a la guerra Espadas de Hierro. Desde México hasta Argentina, todas las comunidades judías de Latinoamérica se han movilizado dando apoyo a Israel, muchas veces enfrentando a fuerzas locales que brindan apoyo a Palestina, sin que nadie pueda diferenciar entre el movimiento terrorista Hamas y el derecho de los palestinos a tener su Estado. Carlos, has estado en Argentina, en México, viendo el apoyo que recibe Israel. Cuéntanos toda la impresión que has tenido en estos dos importantes países de Latinoamérica.
Ciertamente, Nicole, estuve en estos dos países y en el primero fue la entrega de los premios de la innovación de Ilan Network, que su fundador, Isaac Asa, es un evento donde había 500 de las personas más influyentes de México y de la comunidad sumamente emocionados. Compartió con todos los que estaban ahí presentes un momento de su visita a Israel. Y quiero que veamos ahora un segundo de ese momento.
Lo más doloroso fue visitar el domingo pasado por la noche a la familia Baruch, padres de Adi. Adi era una joven de 23 años. Su madre me contó que fue una niña independiente, alegre y siempre ocupada en ayudar a sus padres, a sus dos hermanos menores. Líder entre sus amigas y llena de ilusión. Adi era apasionada de la fotografía e inició su propio negocio a los 16 años. Cubría todos los eventos y alegrías de la zona, amaba la vida y estaba llena de sueños. Su ilusión era casarse con su novio, formar una familia y fotografiar el mundo. Les voy a leer algo que Adi escribió. Lograr tus sueños es la felicidad verdadera. Si no tienes sueños, jamás serás feliz. Adi y su padre fueron llamados a servir el mismo día, en zonas diferentes. Esta foto es el día que salieron ambos de su casa y se vieron por última vez. Y esta foto se la mandó Adi a su mamá un par de horas antes de que un misil lanzado por Hamas impactara cerca de ella y le arrebatara la vida.
Carlos, se vio a Isaac Asa muy emocionado, profundamente tocado por su visita a Israel. Cuéntanos sobre ese momento y en Argentina, las oportunidades que tuviste.
Bueno, realmente lo de Isaac Asa fue tremendo porque él contó todo su viaje. Yo elegí solamente un momento y ya vamos a tener la oportunidad de pasarlo. Pero en Argentina tuve oportunidad de ser invitado a diferentes medios para explicar lo que está pasando en Israel. Lo más importante fue el acto realizado el 7-12 con 2 meses del atentado. Y escuchemos algunas voces y algunas palabras, entre ellas la del embajador de Israel en Argentina, Eyal Sela.
Necesito que me ayuden a pedir por Luis, la pareja de mi mamá, que es un reconocido bailarín y cuyos 10 nietos lo esperan para abrazarlo y volver a saborear la maravillosa comida que él les prepara. Hay aún 130 secuestrados en los sótanos y túneles del cautivario de Hamas, y cada uno de ellos merece regresar con sus familias.
El Estado argentino tiene que comprometerse y unirse a nuestro reclamo. Todos los secuestrados deben ser liberados sanos y salvos. Con vida se los llevaron, con vida los queremos.
Bueno, fue un evento muy emocionante y muy importante. Vemos el apoyo de la comunidad judía argentina, llamamiento a la liberación de los más de 130 israelíes que todavía están secuestrados en Gaza, entre ellos muchos que son de nacionalidad también argentina, el famoso niño Kfir, su hermano Ariel, los padres Shiri y Yarden, y algunos de sus familiares estaba acá, y también la llamada condena al terrorismo, del derecho de Israel de autodefensa. Todo esto coincide con la primera noche de Hanukkah, la fiesta de la esperanza y la fiesta de la luz. Entonces, para mí fue un evento muy emocionante.
una de las tareas más importantes en estos días es la de explicar y comentar qué es lo que está pasando en el Medio Oriente desde el 7 de octubre, qué es lo que ha estado venido ocurriendo entre Israel y el grupo terrorista Hamas.
Se encuentra vía Zoom Gabriel Ventascal, fundador de la organización Hatzat Hasheni, la cara de la verdad, que es una organización especializada en diplomacia pública. Gabriel también es autor de 300 preguntas, 300 palabras. Gracias, Gabriel, por estar con nosotros en I-24 News. Bienvenido.
Gracias. Comencemos por la pregunta más simple. ¿Cuáles son las 300 preguntas?
A ver, lo que tenía un profesor de publicidad que me decía que una persona que no sabe explicar una película de cine o un partido de fútbol en 100 palabras, entonces es importante que se dedique a otra cosa y no a explicar. Entonces, lo que planteamos en el libro es una cantidad de temas relacionados con la evolución del conflicto palestino-israelí, sobre la naturaleza del conflicto palestino-israelí y sobre posibles escenarios a partir de lo que está ocurriendo.
Estuve contigo en una charla en la que mencionaste 4 puntos para resolver la situación de Israel en el mundo. ¿Podrías repetirla de alguna manera?
4 puntos. ¿Te referías a...? Recordame.
Darle solución a este conflicto que tenemos con Hamas y con los palestinos.
Yo lo que supongo que te refieres es a que vemos varios escenarios posibles. El primero, que Israel conquiste la Franja de Gaza y que pasa a ser potencia ocupante del territorio y que se quede ahí durante un tiempo prolongado. Yo creo que es un escenario menor. Me cuesta creer que algo así ocurra. Lo segundo es que Israel, bajo presión de Estados Unidos o en concordancia con parte de la coalición de gobierno, le entregue el poder de la Franja de Gaza a la autoridad palestina. No creo que sea la postura esta del primer ministro de Israel, ni creo que sea parte de la postura de buena parte de la población. Y el tercer escenario es que se crea una especie de autoridad palestina suplementaria, en donde algún líder palestino administre la Franja de Gaza desde el punto de vista civil y que Israel lo que haga es guardar la autonomía para poder intervenir militarmente cuando lo crea conveniente. En estos 3 escenarios existe un cuarto escenario, que es que los líderes del Hamas no permanezcan en la Franja de Gaza, sino que se exilien, copiando el modelo de la OLP del año 1982, y se habla posiblemente de Argelia como sede de la recepción de estos líderes del Hamas si fuesen exiliados.
Gabriel, uno de los temas fundamentales que nos enfrentamos hoy en día es una lucha desigual que existe en las redes sociales. Aparentemente todo lo que nosotros hacemos en la televisión, en los medios, en Twitter, no alcanza como para cubrir la desventaja que tiene Israel ahí. ¿Qué es lo que debería hacerse para que haya un cambio en esa zona?
Bueno, ante todo, es verdad, la desventaja existe y además la desventaja se produce por varios factores, entre ellos por una comprensión del Medio Oriente quizás un tanto primitiva de creer que es un conflicto territorial. Y lo segundo está solapada por prejuicios antisemitas acumulados durante años, ante los cuales es muy difícil dar batalla. Pero lo que puedo decirte sí es que ante todo es importante preservar a las comunidades judías, o sea, crear un antivirus de conocimiento en donde el ataque hacia los judíos o hacia Israel no penetre en nuestros hijos o en nuestros adultos. Y lo segundo, tener una intención de dar batalla intelectual y los contenidos para poder brindar esa batalla intelectual. Yo creo que en ese sentido se puede ganar una discusión fáctica cuando se tiene los conocimientos y la intención para poder doblegar una acusación.
Gabriel Ventascal, muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros en I-24 News, aclararnos. Seguramente vamos a tener que tenerte aquí en el estudio un día para hablar sobre tu libro y un tema tan profundo como es este conflicto y todas sus vicisitudes.
Así es. Muchas gracias, Gabriel.
Un placer.
La liberación de secuestrados fue una pequeña luz en la oscuridad de lo que está haciendo esta guerra. Se crean historias y esta vez una de esas historias tiene acento argentino. Ofelia Feller fue secuestrada el 7 de octubre y liberada el 28 de octubre. Su sobrino Hernán Feller fue su voz en el cautiverio, ya que él transmite fútbol y llega a millones de personas.
Así es, Carlos. Hernán Feller, periodista deportivo en Argentina, que hoy nos acompaña en los estudios de I-24 News. Hernán, bienvenido aquí en Tel Aviv.
Muy bien, y nos acompaña también Silvio Joskovich, el director
titular del Departamento de Emprendimientos Sionistas de la Organización Sionista Mundial.
Ok, tiene un título largo, pero bien se los vale. Okay.
¿Qué tal, Hernán? Cuéntanos cómo fue para ti, y es una experiencia que yo sé que te lo han preguntado varias veces, enterarte que tu tía había sido secuestrada y comenzó esa ola de ayuda, de energía desde Argentina a Israel.
Bueno, primero una felicidad enorme, un alivio muy grande de terminar con ese calvario, con ese sufrimiento, con la incertidumbre que genera tener a alguien tan querido secuestrado y no tener noticias y no saber qué pasa y qué es de su vida. Y bueno, esa mañana nos juntamos en la casa de mis padres con mis hermanos y con toda la familia para verlo como si fuese la final del Mundial, pero por algo mucho más importante, que era la vida de alguien tan querido. Y en el momento que la vimos bajar de la camioneta a la Cruz Roja, fue una emoción muy grande, estallamos en llanto todos, nos abrazamos. Pero bueno, como dije recién, felices y aliviados, pero la tarea todavía no ha terminado.
Obviamente, queda todavía por liberar a todavía muchos de los que todavía siguen presos. En el caso de ustedes están trayendo a gente que venga a conocer qué es lo que está pasando en Israel.
Estamos trayendo delegaciones de toda Latinoamérica. Trajimos 2 delegaciones, una de dirigentes comunitarios de la Argentina. Trajimos a directores educativos de toda América Latina y bueno, tuvimos el honor de poder apoyar para traer a Hernán aquí a Israel porque el tema de los secuestrados tiene que quedar sobre la mesa. Tenemos la obligación de que se siga manteniendo viva esta llama hasta que el último de los secuestrados venga. Y fue una iniciativa de la Organización Sionista Mundial, del departamento que yo dirijo, pero también participaron FACMA, que es la Federación Argentina de Centros Comunitarios Macabeos, que es el umbrella de los centros comunitarios y deportivos en la Argentina, y también de Limud. Limud es un grupo sensacional que trabaja por el judaísmo alternativo y atrae a los no afiliados y también a la sociedad gentil para mostrar el judaísmo dentro del país, y la Organización Sionista Argentina.
Silvio, cuando estuviste en la embajada de Argentina aquí con el cargado de negocios que estuvo el presidente de la DAIA, el presidente de la AMIA, me dijiste en tus declaraciones que no son rehenes, son secuestrados. ¿Cuál es la diferencia?
La diferencia es que rehenes tiene un estatus en una guerra, tiene un estatus determinado. Aquí no fue una guerra, aquí entraron a secuestrar a gente, por eso es distinto. Y por supuesto para el continente latinoamericano, el tema secuestrado, conocemos, tiene una temática mucho más fuerte porque es la historia lamentable de toda América Latina. Por eso son secuestrados, inclusive los soldados también son secuestrados, porque no fueron en combate, no cayeron en manos en combate.
Hernán, ahora viene la pregunta futbolera, digamos. Vos trabajás en un medio que transmite todas las semanas, todos los días, no tengo idea, porque cada vez que estoy en Argentina, todos los días hay fútbol.
Todos los días.
Todos los días hay fútbol, pero la idea de sumar tu reclamo antes del partido, no sé durante, pero antes del partido, contame cómo nace esa idea.
Nace desde el corazón y sigue siendo del corazón. Hoy siento una responsabilidad y cargo con ella con mucho compromiso, porque hay que seguir haciéndolo por más que mi tía ya haya regresado. Y bueno, la verdad que nace porque primero tengo la posibilidad de la libertad de expresión tanto en el canal como en la radio, en Teis Sports y en Disport Radio, porque muchas veces en los medios en los que uno trabaja dicen que tenemos libertades y después a la hora de la verdad no aparece. Y acá tuve desde el comienzo la posibilidad de poder decir lo que quería, y la realidad es que mi reclamo, que fue siempre y seguirá siendo siempre antes del comienzo de cada partido, apunta a 2 cosas que creo que son las más importantes hoy en esta historia: condenar al grupo terrorista Hamas y pedir por la devolución de los secuestrados. No hablo de política, no hablo de los temas de Estado, no hablo si alguien tiene razón o no tiene razón. Acá hay que condenar a Hamas por el acto miserable que cometió y pedir la liberación de los secuestrados. Eso es lo único que apunto.
Bueno, por eso ahora veamos cómo Hernán hacía el llamamiento a la liberación de su tía Ofelia de esta manera.
Estamos en el Estadio Maracaná esperando por Brasil y Argentina a través de Disport Radio y Radio Rivadavia. Y a 45 días de la masacre del 7 de octubre en Israel, seguimos condenando enérgicamente al grupo terrorista Hamas. Seguimos exigiendo la liberación y el regreso inmediato de los 240 secuestrados, 22 argentinos y un brasileño. Que cada uno pueda volver a su casa. No te da culpa no decir nada. No te da vergüenza el silencio. Omitir, callar, no decir es sinónimo de complicidad. Devuelvan a Ofelia. Devuelvan a todos los secuestrados. Los estamos esperando.
Bueno, Hernán, decir no te da vergüenza el silencio con todos los jugadores. Ver la imagen de todos, de Messi, y nombrar ese hecho tan nuestro y tan de la región como ha sido lo que ha vivido Israel. ¿Cómo te sentiste en esa libertad?
Bueno, yo, hay veces que uno, cuando habla sin preparar nada, se dice que es solamente del corazón, pero cuando uno escribe también muchas veces son del corazón. Y ante una situación emocional tan grande como es hablar de un familiar secuestrado o de una situación que nos involucra a todos, yo cada texto lo preparé, lo tuve en mi cabeza, pero además escrito para poder decirlo bien, porque es un momento de mucho nervio, de mucha emoción, de mucha tristeza. Entonces quería dejar claro el mensaje como tenía que ser. Y bueno, en cada uno que hice fue distinto a otro, pero siempre con energía, en algunos más enfáticos que en otros, pero siempre con el objetivo de reclamar por los secuestrados y condenando el terrorismo de Hamas.
Veamos ahora entonces cómo fue una vez que la tía Ofelia fue liberada y cómo fue recibido su mensaje.
Hola tía Ofelia, no podemos ocultarlo, estamos felices y aliviados, pero seguimos alzando la voz. Todavía quedan 137 personas secuestradas. Seguimos condenando enérgicamente al grupo terrorista Hamas. Violaron, torturaron, secuestraron y asesinaron. Y vos en silencio. No vamos a parar. La tarea todavía no terminó. Celebraremos el día que regresen todos a sus casas.
Vemos que Argentina es un país totalmente futbolizado, para llamarlo de alguna manera. ¿De qué manera recibieron tus colegas? Porque eras el único que hacía este tipo de llamamiento.
No, en líneas generales con mucha empatía, por lo menos mis compañeros, yo no todos los partidos hago los relatos con el mismo comentarista, pero en general todos lo recibieron muy bien, me acompañaron, me apoyaron. Por supuesto que cuando a veces repetía con el mismo comentarista no me volvía a decir algo igual, pero tenía su guiño, tenía su acompañamiento, a veces en silencio, pero el silencio respetuoso, no el silencio de ocultar, y lo tomaron muy bien y me acompañaron y siempre estuvieron pendientes dentro de un partido de fútbol y fuera del partido de fútbol de cómo seguía la historia de mi tía y de todos los secuestrados.
Bueno, llegaste a Israel, lo primero que hiciste, me imagino, ver a tu tía. ¿Cómo la conseguiste?
Bien, la verdad que la vi en una videollamada el día siguiente de la liberación y era mi tía.
En la videollamada.
En la videollamada ya me di cuenta que era mi tía, por supuesto después de todo lo que le tocó vivir, pero el encuentro fue maravilloso, mucha emoción, mis papás que me acompañaron, tanto mi mamá como mi papá, muy conmovidos por la situación, por todo lo que generó, por la tristeza, el dolor de no saber de alguien que uno quiere qué era lo que estaba pasando, si le íbamos a encontrar viva, cómo iba a bajar del camión de la Cruz Roja. Y la verdad que estamos felices disfrutando de este momento que estamos viviendo juntos.
¿Y hay algo que te contó especial que quizás quieras compartir con nosotros?
Tendríamos que hacer un programa de 6 horas, pero va a ser cortito y creo que eso...
Algo que te haya llamado la atención.
Bueno, para que la gente entienda lo que vivió.
La oscuridad.
Ella en varios momentos creyó que iba a vivir un holocausto, otra vez. Porque le daban 2 veces por día comida, porque la comida era muy seca y no le pasaba y tenía miedo de morirse de hambre. Y dijo, tengo que ser fuerte para poder salir de acá, pero pensó que iba a vivir un holocausto.
Bueno, nosotros estamos viendo que te encontraste con ella y que además tuviste la posibilidad de regalarle un libro. Contanos un poco qué es este libro de la tía Ofelia que estamos viendo ahí mientras vamos viendo algunas de sus páginas. ¿Qué vendría a ser?
Bueno, el libro es un poco para dejar un testimonio de todo lo que ella vivió, del horror, para que quienes sigan en las próximas vidas sepan todo lo que vivió y que no se debe repetir, pero sobre todo porque yo todos los días, desde el 7 de octubre que le mandé el primer mensaje de WhatsApp y que ella nunca leyó, me prometí que todos los días, hasta que me vuelva a contestar, le iba a escribir aunque ella no lo lea y no sepa que yo le estaba escribiendo. Era algo que me hacía bien a mí, era algo que a mí me daba la posibilidad de sentirme conectado con ella y que realmente me tiene muy contento, y dejé ahí todos esos WhatsApp que le mandé, muchas reacciones de la gente, mucho acompañamiento de la gente, fotos de la familia, fotos, reacciones, y un libro que tiene que ver con todo lo que se vivió desde el 7 de octubre hasta el 28 de noviembre con su liberación.
Buenísimo.
Silvio, como organización sionista mundial, en lo que respecta al lado latinoamericano, ¿cómo ha sido Latinoamérica ante todo este hecho que está viviendo, porque lo siguen viviendo Israel?
Latinoamérica se presentó, se alineó detrás de Israel en una forma sensacional. La comunidad judía de Latinoamérica siempre fue una comunidad judía muy amena con Israel, pero después del 7 de octubre la comunidad se alineó detrás de Israel. Pero lo importante aquí es que nosotros estamos hablando de una guerra entre la oscuridad y la luz, entre el bien y el mal. Esta guerra no es solamente la comunidad judía. Es la guerra de la comunidad judía cristiana, es la guerra de todos aquellos que buscan el bien y quieren de este mundo un mundo mejor. Por eso es importante recalcar que no es solamente algo de los judíos o de Israel, es algo del mundo entero.
Exactamente. Bueno, tenemos un mensaje, ¿verdad, Carlos?, que grabó la tía Ofelia para ustedes, y otro también que dejaste en la plaza de los secuestrados en Tel Aviv.
Yo soy Ofelia Reutemann, fui secuestrada, estuve 53 días, de los cuales 46 estuve en una casa sola, casi sin luz, casi sin comida. Fueron días muy hondos y muy difíciles, con mucho, mucho temor. A la llegada, hace 3 días, estando con mi familia, que la añoré muchísimo, me comentaron que vos, Hernán, sobrino mío, hiciste un trabajo muy lindo. Te agradezco mucho nuevamente, y gracias al pueblo argentino que me conoció no de esta manera. Hubiese querido que me conozcan, pero saben que soy Ofelia Reutemann y que soy argentina.
Me parece increíble estar en Israel. Hacía 26 años que no pisaba esta tierra, y a pesar de eso, la siento en mi casa.
Bueno,
sí.
Uno, la felicidad de la tía de saber que salió, que te mandó un mensaje por tu tarea, y además estuviste ayer en la plaza con todo Israel y dijiste, me siento en casa después de estar 26 años sin venir a Israel. ¿Cómo funciona eso?
Funciona porque el corazón te dice cómo funciona. Yo me siento, no quiero decir que me siento israelí, pero me siento y soy muy judío, y respeto la tradición, la historia, nuestras fiestas, y lo llevo bien en alto y con orgullo. Y cuando uno dice las cosas del corazón, salen como salieron ayer, en una plaza que estaba repleta, que había más de 15.000 personas. Y en algún momento, cuando lo hablábamos con Silvio, digo el discurso en español. Exacto. O lo hago en fonética en hebreo. No, es importante escuchar una voz distinta a la que se escuchan todos los días acá, y entonces, bueno, él me ayudó con la traducción.
¿Cómo fue la sensación del público que te oía decir eso en español? Silvio lo traducía en hebreo.
No, fue hermoso. La verdad que yo estaba muy nervioso, aparte conmovido. Nervioso por la situación, claro, y conmovido por todo lo que pasaba, y por estar en un lugar donde tanta gente está sufriendo, y donde alguna vez estuvieron mis primos y mis tíos ahí reclamando por mi tía. Y después, bueno, se dijo lo que se dijo, desde el corazón, pensado, escrito, y después también, por supuesto, la impronta de Silvio para poder también transmitir desde su lugar lo que yo estaba haciendo, porque si lo hubiese hecho de otra forma, no se hubiese interpretado para toda la gente lo que yo quería transmitir. La verdad que fue una noche muy, muy especial e inolvidable.
Última pregunta antes de despedirnos. Distintos proyectos que ustedes sigan trayendo para conocer lo que está pasando en Israel de aquí a futuro.
Comenzamos con un proyecto de mandar ahora en Hanukkah, en la fiesta de las luminarias, enviamos a héroes que dieron luz. En el 7 de octubre enviamos a alrededor de 17 personas que tuvieron un protagonismo el 7 de octubre, salvando gente, estando en las luchas con los terroristas, y vamos a continuar mandando gente para que el tema siga estando sobre la mesa, como dije antes, para que podamos trabajar todo el mundo en contra del mal, en contra de la oscuridad.
Bueno, no nos queda más que agradecerles a ambos.
A ustedes por la invitación.
A ustedes, especialmente Hernán, por haber venido hasta aquí, contarnos tu experiencia, a los proyectos que van acercando a Israel y que de alguna manera transmiten lo que está pasando. Debo decir que yo estuve, al principio comenté que estuve en México y en Argentina, y donde mucha gente no tiene la menor idea, debo decirlo así, la menor idea de lo que está pasando, y nuestra vida aquí es muy diferente. A ambos, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros.
Gracias, Hernán, gracias, Silvio, por el trabajo que hacen. Y los voces fuertes son ustedes.
Y nuestro pedido, como siempre, es el de que liberen absolutamente a todos los secuestrados. Así es como debemos decirlo. Los que quieren pueden seguirnos en Facebook, en X, en Instagram y en la página web de i24 News. Y nos estaremos viendo la semana que viene.
Claro que sí, Carlos. Muchísimas gracias a todos. Hasta la próxima.